Welcome back, guys, to another Game Time Discussions. We're really excited today to do our live stream. There's a few of us in here, but we're going to go and talk about some of the stuff that happened this week. We're going to look at the Buffalo Miami game. We did not expect a blowout there, not even kind of close when we did our Thursday night stuff. Miami was actually favored on the weekend or on the week, which is just after watching that game, Buffalo just
I feel ashamed
honestly.
for picking them.
Yeah, right. Like, I mean, I picked Buffalo to win that game, but I wasn't necessarily confident in any way. I thought, they were gonna do it because I believe in Josh Allen, and Josh Allen keeps his team in close games. He wins on Thursday night, and he just continued to do that. And they just looked really good defensively. We talk about how they're actually shorter in their secondary than they've been in recent years. They did not miss a beat. I liked Taylor Rapp when he came out. I loved his story and how he does those like super Iron Man things that he's a crazy freak athlete and stuff, but didn't expect him to play so well. I mean, Benford played great. It just that whole secondary like really came together, even without Teron Johnson, their starting nickel. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah,
But
I mean, nobody really kind of showed up for Miami. It just kind of from the jump was pretty out there. Tyreek
right,
Hill, very pedestrian day. He was kind of in and out of the lineup towards the end of the game. Not sure if there's anything to monitor there or if that's just it's out of it. And
right.
Tua before his injury that we'll talk about in a second was having a terrible game. Couple of his picks actually were not his fault. I think it was just choice routes or receivers not being in the right spots where they need to be.
Yeah.
But either way, most of them were going to players that were not really involved.
So on one of them, Robbie Chosen fell down
Hmm.
on a like seam route, but still the ball was thrown directly to Benford.
The
And
bad
then
one was when he
the
tried to throw it away and he still
yeah,
threw the pick
and threw the
six, and
pick,
that was
yeah.
kind of the end of the day.
Yeah, and then also he had the tip ball that came out. On the screen we're looking at the game. I'll bring up the box score. Even more so than that though, we're about to have to talk about something very serious with Tua because I just personally, I don't think he should ever play football again. That is, I know that's not, I'm not a doctor by any means, but I think with his situation and his recent injuries and everything that he's gone through, um, him playing football again is a serious like liability for his own like health for the rest of his life. Um, and I just think, he plays a position that takes hits that are unprotected at times and he just can't at this point
Well, the
anymore.
scary thing to me was that it wasn't even that hard of a hit
Yeah.
when he went down. And I understand sometimes you just get hit wrong and, you get shook up for a second. But when he started seizing up, and it's just like,
Yeah.
you ran into him and
Yeah.
like it wasn't that violent of a hit and you're still kind of having those spasms. It's very scary to look at. If I was within his circle, it would be really hard to be behind him continuing. But at the end of the day, there's protocol in place. So if he's able to pass the set protocol that, they have approved on both party
Right.
sides, like it's kind of hard to set that standard because once you say that he can't play, then it's like a subjective call and that's like the slippery slope.
But the question is, and we have Dustin, of course, is a physician's assistant. He's a very intelligent person when it comes to that field. We are not obviously experts in that field, but even Dustin's like, why it's almost like a liability for the team to sign off on him though to play.
Hmm.
And so that's another complete question that we're going to have to talk about when throughout the season or next season. Will someone sign off for him to play when he could go? This could happen again, and then they have to, it drops almost back on them at times. Looking at the rest of the game, both of these running backs did pretty good. James Cook had 11 for 78, 2 touchdowns, and then he had a receiving touchdown. The first touchdown of the game was 1 for 17. And then Achan is just him. Achan is absolutely him. And I hated having to play him in fantasy this week. And I unfortunately
You have
get to
to do
play
it
him
again
next
next
week.
week.
Yeah, because we had a trade in our fantasy league. So I get to play him twice in a row. That's gonna be awesome. But yeah, he's a stud. And even with Skylar Thompson, Achan's gonna get the ball much as they can get it to him. So I'm not necessarily looking forward to that this next week either. So, but it's gonna
Yeah,
be
I
cool.
mean, there was the funny thing with his injury, he had two DNPs on basically
Right.
walkthrough practices, and that kind of scared people off in some regard of playing him. And to me, his injuries last year, which he dealt with basically three separate injuries, and games he was limited in, he was not very involved. Well, one, it's a year into this, and then also all of those games, Raheem Mostert was the one getting the benefit. This time, it's Mostert was already ruled out. It was just
Right.
Achan and Jalen Wright slash Jeff Wilson, who Jeff Wilson also got hurt.
Hmm.
That's probably why Achan ended up playing late into the game, and Jalen Wright wasn't really being very effective in his debut touches because he
Right.
was a coach's inactive last week. But yeah, he played very well. You should feel very good if you have shares of him.
It's
He looks like a guy that, even despite Tua going down, can be peppered with, right now, I think he'd be wide receiver 8 if you were just talking his wide receiver stats,
yeah.
which is Kamara esque.
He has
And
seven.
so,
He had 7 targets in this game, and he had 7 targets in the first week. I mean, 14 targets in the first 2 weeks might be.
and
I
he's
mean, that's
catching all
more
of them.
than most number one receivers right now in the
Hmm.
NFL. So yeah, get excited about Achan. Get less excited about Waddle and Tyreek Hill. They do take a dip. I did see a stat. Obviously, it's like 4 to 5 points, fantasy points, when Tua is out. Last year with Skylar Thompson, that will definitely be hurting their upside. And I'd be very surprised, I guess, to say if Tua decided to come back this season. I think that's kind of like one of those things that's almost out of the cards, in my opinion. But like you said, there's protocols, and I am not in the camp, and I am not an expert, so that's just a humble
I
opinion.
mean, at the very least,
But
like, I'm just one that, he knows the risk going in. And if he
mm,
passes all the tests that you give him that one last opportunity. I know that sounds kind of harsh, but it's supposed to be a violent game, even though it's gotten less violent over the years. And so this can happen to anybody at any moment.
right,
So that's just kind of where I see it. The concerning thing, like we've said before with Miami, basically the Jets, Dolphins, and Bills were all the same odds to both win the division and make the playoffs. So
right,
all of them were supposed to be 10 plus win teams and very good. And Miami, their chance to win the division was to start out strong, kind of similar to the Jets. But, now with Tua down, and they're going to, for the foreseeable future, go with Skylar Thompson, that's going to be very concerning, considering, there's games that if you are dropping to Tennessee again,
hmm,
and New England on the road, and Seattle on the road, and you go into your bye and you're not at a positive win-loss record, you're really in an uphill battle in the AFC.
yeah. Looking at their schedule real quick, because we have it up here. Seattle, Tennessee, New England. All 3 games are winnable when you have Tua, and they get much more of a question mark when you don't.
Mhm.
Could have gone 4-1 pretty handedly with these other teams that are coming up, but now it's like
I
you're
mean,
probably going to drop one at
at
least,
the very
minimum.
least, if I had to guess, I would say that as a precaution, they would hold him out for Sunday. Also, it's a benefit because you get 3 extra days because this would happen on Thursday,
Right.
and then also week 4 is a Monday night game, so it's another day of prep. So really, it's 18 days between games if you were to project potentially return to Tennessee. But I would understand if they wanted to hold him out all the way through, you know, that week 7 or week
The week
6
by.
bye, and
Yeah.
then return week 7 against Indy. Um, but at the same time, we'll just kind of see. We saw some crazy breaking news last week, with Tyreek Hill at rest, Dak extension that we didn't think would happen this season. And so he was supposed to meet with some neurologists possibly today, tomorrow, and maybe we'll get an update, or we'll just kind of see what happens. But if we drop that live, that'll be fun to talk about for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what we'll do next is we'll get out of this, and we'll talk about our picks for this week.
It's a
We
very straightforward week.
Yeah, everybody's kind of
A
on the
lot of
same page
similarities.
across the board. Um, I picked Buffalo. I actually picked them as the spread pick, one of my spread picks at +2.5. When you pick an underdog, you kind of go with their spread no matter what, basically. But so I picked Buffalo. to win this game. But then we basically, I think, picked all the same teams for the most part.
We
And
had all 16 the same, me and Emery. And
uh,
other people typically just one or two different, or actually 15
15, yeah.
today and tomorrow's game. Sorry. Yeah, because I already kind of essentially conceded on the week of him passing me in the standings. Um, there's a couple different the ESPN guys who killed it last week, 15-1, 14-2. Really, their only difference for today and tomorrow is the Pittsburgh game,
Yeah.
which that's supposed to be possible showers today. It's going to be a lower scoring game, and Pittsburgh second straight game on the road. So we both. I was surprised that both of us sided with Denver in this one, but that's what we went. But also, it was interesting with the spread picks how Emery says typically when he picks upsets, he goes with that.
Right.
Um,
I did not
and
pick
he did
Denver.
not pick that. So that
As
was another interesting thing.
my most confident, I wasn't nearly as confident in Denver, I guess, overall. I think that they win, but I also see the situation where they could lose by 2 touchdowns and it
Mhm.
not be surprising. And then I could see them winning by a couple points and, that kind of thing. So I'm more comfortable picking other games. Dallas is one that Cam picks. I completely agree with him. I just thought New Orleans really surprised me last week. I wasn't expecting that because I was really tough on them all off season. So the fact that they played so well, I'm gonna wait on to see what happens with them. Basically, is where I was at.
That's fair. I mean, but at the same time, Dallas performed even better than
They
we
did.
expected as
They
well
looked great.
because I mean, Cleveland was favored in that game. I picked them outright and, that was one of my favorites for the weekend, but I didn't expect basically it being over, early in the third quarter and Cleveland just not being able to do anything at all.
Yeah, they smoked them. It was not good. I'm not sure what's gonna happen in Cleveland because Deshaun just looks terrible. Um, and then we both picked San Francisco -4.5. I think against Minnesota, I don't really understand why money's coming in on Minnesota. It was at -6 for San Francisco earlier in the week,
It's down to 4.5.
and now it's 4.5. I don't really get why. I know that Sam Darnold played great, but like this team just went out there and beat the Jets by what? I think it was 12 points or something.
Yeah, it wasn't close.
Yeah,
It should have
so
been more. And Tyrod Taylor
right.
ruined my night.
Yeah,
It was
exactly.
awful.
But like that's what I'm saying. Like I don't see how San Francisco doesn't you don't have more confidence in San Francisco winning by a touchdown than you do at, like how is money coming in
Hmm.
basically on Minnesota is my feeling. Like I just don't get it. Feels like it's
Yeah,
going the wrong way.
I mean, maybe they're just like this is a short week. They're coming off a high,
Yeah,
and CMC IR news. Hufanga is out today.
right.
Could be a couple as well that are questionable that we don't have updates on yet. And then Minnesota just riding high, which they played one of our worst teams or worst projected teams for
Yes.
every
I'm,
single metric.
I mean, we have Washington on the next game, playing the Giants, and we have both of them as, we both have Washington as one of our favorite picks.
The
Um,
scary thing is just with the Giants have had their number. They've swept them 2
mm,
straight seasons, and so that's why this line is so close. It's a rivalry game. Sometimes rivalry games, weird things happen. The Giants have also gotten the better of the Eagles in
mhm,
recent years when they've been good, and um, it, you always have to expect a dogfight in this one. So that's why it's so close. It's not like a comfortable one, but it's just like this team is we think is clearly better than the other one, and they're
right,
at home. But we'll just kind of see what happens because Washington actually didn't look that much improved last week either against Tampa Bay. They
right.
kind of salvaged the score with their rookie quarterback, probably playing the best of the bunch that debuted, but a couple rushing touchdowns kind
Yeah,
of masked the subpar day. Terry McLaurin was a non-factor whatsoever. That was kind of my concern with him all summer long of just wide receiver ones and rookie receivers don't really, take off that well. But we'll just kind of see if they rebound this week. Giants should be a relatively easier matchup from a DFS perspective, and it's one of our sneaky games on the slate that if you want to get different, I don't expect a ton of ownership outside of Jaden Daniels in this game.
right, of course. And then you have Cincinnati bouncing back at +6 against KC. I think that's reasonable because I think Cincinnati's obviously better than what they showed us in week 1. That's not even a question.
Something that I've learned is just to always bet on good teams that get embarrassed the week before, whether that's by a blowout or whether that's being upset by a
Right,
much worse or inferior team. And this Cincinnati has had Kansas City's number in recent years. So if this was at home, I would have serious, thoughts about possibly picking an upset.
right,
But I just can't do that. But Cincinnati getting 6, I thought that it's going to be a very, very good game in my eyes. Hopefully.
right. Let's talk about we'll go to the lobby over here and we'll go to classic. We'll get onto the main slate, start talking about the slate as a whole. I know that's what everybody wants to talk about. So, let's see. Let's look at this one here. All right. I believe it's 11 games on the main site this week, or 13 games on the main site this week. So lots of games, lots of options to play. Some things that I think we should mention. Cam had the weather report up. I don't remember everything, but if you have it for us, we
Yeah,
could
there's
talk about it real
nothing.
quick.
There's nothing crazy. One was kind of funny, and it doesn't involve the main slate at all. Pretty much, in dome, green weather for the most part. The Jets and Titans have a low chance of some brief rain, but nothing crazy. Um, Pittsburgh and Denver is the one that has the biggest possibility to linger. 30-40% chance of rain. That's also should be a low scoring game, defensive battle. So, that kind of aligns with our thoughts on either fading that game or just picking a defense. And if
Right.
you can fit either one, Cleveland and Jacksonville actually could see pop up storms, but we haven't really talked about that game at all this week.
Hmm.
If that gives you a boost to ETN or Jerome Ford, more power to you. I don't think that either passing game was going to be targeted in any of our lines that we make today, depending regardless of the slate. And the funny one again has no effect on this slate, but Chicago, Houston has an indoor stadium, but apparently they are insisting the roof will be open
Hmm.
despite 40% chance of storms. Don't know why you're that adamant about keeping it if there is that big of a risk, but we'll just kind of take the ebbs and flows of that and see how that goes. That should be a really fun one between kind of upcoming quarterbacks back to back years.
Right.
With CJ Stroud having a sensational rookie year, and then the hype that Caleb has, and then his subpar debut last week.
Yeah, we'll talk about that game later on because it is not on the main slate, like Cam said. Um, let's start on the main slate. Let's talk about some quarterbacks. We're going to give 6 quarterbacks, 2 in the upper tier, more expensive guys, because truly, if you're going to play the upper tier, those are probably the guys you're going to want to play. The middle tier, and then the lower tier, kind of like the puke guys under 5,900. So we'll start off. I mean, I know personally, I want to start talking about Patrick Mahomes. He's probably going to be one of my most rostered quarterbacks on the weekend. He's got, who his pass catchers are. Unfortunately, we did see Hollywood Brown go to IR, possibly at season ending because of his AC joint
Yeah, they said
issues.
a return in mid-January, so that rules out basically the entire fantasy season.
Right.
So if you invested anything in him in best ball, we didn't really have a ton of him because he was already kind of the
Yeah.
wide receiver one in that offense to begin with, and he just kind of stayed that way until this shoulder injury
And
in
yeah,
the first preseason game. So um, I think we had about 5-6% maybe,
I think I
but
had less even. I think, yeah.
even if we have it on our mutual one, that's even better for us because knock on wood, we haven't really been affected too much by the injury bug. Just quick segue of CMC, one of our biggest stands was just fading the CMC, back to back workhorse seasons. The 101 has been cursed for 6 straight years of
Right.
nobody finishing within the top 10 of their position except for 2 guys since 2011. That was Aaron Foster, AJ Brown, and I'm sorry, AJ. I'm sorry, Antonio Brown.
Antonio. Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah,
was like,
sorry.
yeah, wrong one.
But yeah, so it's been bad, and we avoided him. Basically, had no shares of him in 300 drafts, and he is now on IR. Wish we would have had Jordan Mason. Have correlated our stand a little bit more, but we're basically even with the field with him. But yeah, he's going to be the guy for the next 5. 5-6 weeks.
Yeah, and the other thing was we didn't know who the backup was going to be. Elijah Mitchell at the beginning of the offseason, it was like, okay, well, he's probably the backup. And then it was like, oh, maybe Isaac Guerindo's the backup because he,
Yeah, we have a ton of backups for San Fran. We just didn't
yeah, not the right one.
single down on
Yeah.
a particular one.
But talking about Patrick Mahomes this week, going up against Cincinnati, the game total is 47.5. One of the highest five. It is third. I just think with him, if he does unlock this week and he goes for 300 plus yards and gets the bonus and say three touchdowns, you know exactly where it's going. You're going to get Rashee Rice. You're going to get Travis Kelce. You're going to get Xavier Worthy. Those are the three guys, especially after the Marquise Brown in news, which we thought he might come back this week. Now it's like, okay, you have three guys, three targets, and Isaiah Pacheco is possibly, I mean, I think you can't pair him with the running back, but like what I'm saying is like, if you're going to play the other side of this game, Isaiah Pacheco is an option too. So
Yeah, and really the only I guess because of the Hollywood injury, now Xavier Worthy's in the player pool. But again, he had 2 touchdowns, but on just 4 targets, and he's 6,100 now.
yeah,
Really hard to get to because it's not even a value. Last week he was 55 on the Thursday Monday slate, but obviously nobody really played him. He was a huge value on the showdown slate at 58, which you
right,
don't really see. If somebody's 55, that means usually they're in the 7,000 range. It's the tight end kind of mid-tier guys on the showdowns, and he just wasn't, and we took advantage of that. But Thursday Monday we avoided him for that very reason, and then he increased $600 from there. Probably not a piece that I want to have my second stack because I like so many receivers today
yeah,
in other spots as well. But if you wanted to go him, that's totally fine.
yeah,
But Rashee Rice is pretty much the guy that I want to get to for sure with Patrick because of how he just ate up the middle of the field targets. And we didn't even get to see the end zone looks that he was frequently getting last year. Travis Kelce is the highest priced tight end on the slate. Um, we'll see what his ownership is because basically the whole position sucked last week.
right,
And so maybe people are just like, no, we got to go cheap tight ends. There are actually a few values, several values under 3,500 that could basically pull, 5 to 10% ownership respectively for each person. So we'll kind of see. And then I honestly don't mind Isaiah Pacheco being a second option because of how many targets he does receive from Patrick Mahomes, and he is the true workhorse. But it is not as common of a build.
right.
So and you have to spend up for it obviously as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're going to get Patrick Mahomes, go get his pass catchers. Absolutely. You should probably double stack Patrick Mahomes, but you can get a little different, I think, this week in or single stacking him because we have some great value wide receivers later on that we'll talk about. Which quarterback do you want to talk about in the upper echelon today?
So I would say Anthony Richardson if you don't have a ton of shares of JT, just because of the fact that they did allow 3 touchdowns to Saquon last week. Indy is now favored on the road. This is the way that they're going to beat them is by pounding it. And if you don't think that JT has multi-touchdown upside, it's because Anthony Richardson probably has 1 to maybe 2 rushing touchdowns in him, respectively. And he actually had a very subpar game that fantasy wise, it doesn't matter. He still got 27, but 9 completions to get 27 points was pretty impressive. And that is missing at least 2 more touchdowns that,
Yeah.
AD Mitchell, his price has kind of stayed moderate. Very interesting option if you wanted to kind of have a low owned guy because he had a catch for 2 yards. If you're just reading a box score, not an impressive debut, but 2 touchdowns that were missed and then another wide open throw that would have had another 40 plus
Yeah.
yards. So he had a potential 100 plus yard day, 2 touchdown day that just completely looked like nothing.
That would have added, the 3-point bonus here.
Oh yeah.
Plus, so much, plus 2 more touchdowns. Like Anthony Richardson
He
would
could
have
have had a
scored
40.
45 points this last week if he just, hits his guy. 9 completions for 212 yards is insane.
It's not sustainable,
No,
but that's
no.
the kind of upside that he has in good matchups and good spots. And we also didn't expect Houston to be so vulnerable over the top like they
Mhm.
were. So if they're vulnerable to Anthony Richardson over the top, it's going to be interesting when we see other, more talented quarterbacks go up against
Right.
them, and maybe that's just a shootout that we're going to target. And then another one in the highest scoring or second highest scoring game, but highest on the 3 o'clock slate is Kyler Murray. He's kind of right smack dab in the middle. Basically, he just kind of was a huge bust last week after a solid start, and none of his pass catchers really paid off because the one
Right.
guy that scored a touchdown, that was his only catch. Trey McBride led the team in targets, had under 8 points. Marvin Harrison Jr. obviously one catch for 4 yards, didn't look good doing it,
Mm.
but then also was missed on a wide open potential,
Game winning touchdown. Yeah.
go ahead touchdown. But the Rams, they honestly held their own against Amon-Ra, but they were beat over the top
Hmm.
by Jameson Williams. And, Sam Laporta had a subpar day, but Detroit typically is just like whatever's working is what we're going to roll with.
Right.
And the run game was working. So that's kind of where they pounded. Um, Marvin Harrison, I don't expect to gain a ton of ownership. Trey McBride, I actually like a lot today in a bounce back spot. Also leading the team in targets. It's not
Yeah.
as concerning as somebody like Dalton Kincaid, who we were high on, and just you don't have a target through 3 quarters. What's going on? Um,
Right.
so
Absolutely.
very interesting to get to if you wanted to pair him with a James Conner,
Who
Michael
was high
Wilson.
touch James Conner
Greg
last week.
Dortch is, I think, up to 46 now, so you got to pay now for him. But he was the most productive receiver of anybody last week. But you want to get to a lot of pieces in this game. Obviously, the chalkiest of the chalk is going to be Cooper Cup today. How are you going to bring it back? Are you going to do an Arizona stack? If you want to, Kyler is an option. If you didn't want to spend up to either AR-15 or Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, there's a couple guys we're going to talk about in the next range, but I think going straight to the other quarterback in this game is interesting. In Matthew Stafford, you do know where the ball is going. He has some options if you wanted to go with Demarcus Robinson or Colby Parkinson. As of course, Cooper Kupp is the main. If you play Matthew Stafford today, guys, please play Cup. Like if you don't play Cup, like you're doing something wrong in fantasy, and it will not pay off more often than it would. He had 49 attempts last week, and 21 of them went to Cooper Cup.
Mm.
So I actually, if y'all watched our shorts earlier in the week, I took the over on 11 and a half targets to Cooper Cup because I'm just like, I don't know where the ball's going otherwise. Like just he's going to throw it to him, and that's that.
Right.
So
I mean, another fun one with him is Tyler Johnson. Just kind
yeah,
of came out of nowhere. He was second on the team with 7 targets. He was about 60% of a snap share. Let me actually pull that up because that's going to be very important to reference when we're talking,
I have it here.
receivers and running backs. But I believe he was at 68%, and obviously Puka Nakua played about a quarter and a half, and then went out permanently for the game, and he took basically the rest of the role. Jordan Whittington basically had nothing. Tutu Atwell, non-factor.
Yeah, I actually have the numbers here. So 78 offensive snaps, 92% for Demarcus Robinson, and then 65% for Tyler Johnson, 25 or 32% for Puka. So I'm guessing as soon as Puka went out, Tyler Johnson replaced him.
Exactly.
He was the direct replacement for him. Tutu had 6 total snaps, and Jordan Whittington had 2. So I'm not really worried about them. But good to say, actually, we were just talking about Colby Parkinson. He had 88% of the snaps. So he is definitely in play.
He's the popular value today. But the interesting thing is, I think a lot of people are gonna, because projections love Demarcus Robinson.
Right.
He's 4,000 and he's good. No denying if you want to go that route, but basically everybody that does a double with Stafford is going to go Cooper Kupp and Demarcus Robinson. So you got to get different somehow.
Right.
So that's going Colby Parkinson at 31 for tight end. So that basically means you're punting the position this week. I can't fault you because of the advice that we gave last week. But Tyler Johnson is 33.
Yeah.
And if you did want to go up and spend on a more price tight end, it's a very interesting route to go.
In this game, you could say, hey, like Trey McBride, I think that, last week, of course, he didn't have the touchdown, but, he was playing every snap basically for them. Let me get that too.
He had 9 targets.
9 targets. Yeah. He played 85% of the snaps. He was out there basically on every route. So yeah, if you wanted to do that, that would be really cool. I think that getting to this game is super important. It's the second highest total at 49.5 behind Tampa Bay, Detroit. And we haven't really talked about Tampa Bay and Detroit. So we'll talk about them in a minute, but I don't necessarily love their quarterbacks this week. So going to this game, getting a quarterback where you know his volume is going, doesn't have any rushing upside, none. But you know where his all those passes are going, so you know what guys to get. It makes a lot of sense in my opinion. And then on the other side, if you go Kyler, he does have the rushing upside, but he also has some very precise pass catchers and guys that you go to. So
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it's frustrating we don't have ownerships to kind of give you guidance off of. But I'm looking on Twitter and I see this person, DFS Kitchen, just kind of seeing a glance of like what other people are expecting. And he actually has basically Tyler Johnson getting half the ownership of Demarcus Robinson, who's going about 9-10%. And then, smaller contests, which is what we recommend for you guys if you're just low bankroll, but you're just trying to build it up with cash game single entries and getting away from the 150, oh, here's $1 million kind of mesmerizing prizes. Those ownerships are going to increase
yes,
in those smaller contests. So I would expect him to be, 12 to 15, and guys that are less than 5% typically are even lower.
yeah,
So if he's already double, I think that's a very interesting route to go. And when we're in afternoon only, there's not a lot of places to get cheap, other than three main guys we'll
right.
talk about. One's on Cincinnati, and two are on the Ram, or basically three are on the Rams. And so picking one of those and maybe the least owned guy is very interesting in my eyes.
I think next we should talk about Cam's favorite contrarian game of the week. We're going to talk about the guy that I actually like and not the one I don't. So we're going to start on the Washington side instead of the Giants side. Jaden Daniels, great with his upside with his legs. I just don't know what you're going to do with the wide receiver that you bring with along. He only had 184 yards, but at the same time, he had 2 touchdowns on the ground, giving him a 28. Giving him his ceiling is what you see here.
First off, I did not realize he fumbled 3 times.
I didn't either. Looking at
But
that, that's crazy.
I mean, what's incredible with him is he's the only guy that I can just comfortably say you don't need to stack him.
Right.
Like even with AR, I don't mind getting to some AD, or if you want to go on that Alec Pierce hype train or something like that. I think Josh Downs is going to be out again, if I remember correctly. But there's pieces to get to with Washington. It's really only Terry, and Terry was a very chalky bust last week. And I understand if you don't want to spend up, mid 5K for your wide receiver 3. 16 rushing attempts in his debut as a quarterback. Obviously, 88 yards. He's going to have breakaway runs that give him a threat to be the 100-yard bonus in that regard. But if he's going to have these kinds of stat lines, but he has an upside for 30 points, and that's without stacking anybody, I just don't think you need to if you don't want to. But I wouldn't just get in a common practice of just I'm always going to unstack my players.
Right.
But this is a very sneaky game that both defenses are bad, and this could be just a sneaky 27-24 game that, Wandale Robinson, who had 12 targets, and,
Right.
Malik Neighbors, who were still waiting for a breakout from him as well, that they could find a way to each have 2-3 touchdowns on each side of the field. And it's just going to be a good game environment for DFS. And if there's not ownership pulling, he's the only guy that I really think will get significant ownership.
Right. For sure.
I bet you he'll be a top 4-5 owned quarterback, and it won't be because he's being stacked.
I think the funny thing is he could be a top 4 quarterback, but then you could be so different with his pass catchers.
Yeah, like Terry McLaurin is his number 1, number 2, and number 3 basically on his own team, and he is 5.5% based on the same resource that I just mentioned, DFS Kitchen.
But I think Luke McCaffrey got 61% last week. De'Ami Brown got 56%. If you wanted to go, hey, it's a tournament lineup only, guys. Don't put this out there as like a cash game lineup. But if you're like, hey, I like Jaden Daniels, what receiver do I want? Well, if I don't believe in Terry getting the touchdown, what if I put Luke McCaffrey in there and he scores? Mm-hmm. All of a sudden you have, I don't even know what he costs, but like a low priced player. And then on the other side, you can be like, okay, well, and I want Malik Neighbors. And then it just like kind of works out that way. I think Brian Robinson is actually very interesting to stack with Jaden Daniels, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, kind of both of the running backs. I mean, nobody had more than 4 targets in this offense last week, and both Eckler and Robinson both gained 4 targets. Eckler, none of his came until the very end when they were down 3 scores.
Right.
But Robinson was very involved in the early portions of the game, and I really like him today a
And
lot.
I think it's an interesting way to do it if you're in tournaments is like go the quarterback with the
Yeah,
running
because
back
nobody
only.
does a single stack of a running back and a quarterback.
Yeah, it's gonna be crazy. Steiger said 16 rushing attempts for a rookie quarterback is crazy work, in my opinion. I completely agree, Steiger. Um, basically, Jaden Jaden Daniels actually doesn't know how to protect himself yet. He's not great at that, so
His
it makes me worried.
there was a rushing touch, and I was sweating at the end because I had an afternoon only line that really cashed for me last Sunday, and basically I needed that second rushing touchdown. He scored, but his helmet came off, and they
Yes,
rolled him
and they
down
rolled
to
him
one,
down.
and he was like, "I'm gonna run it anyway
Mhm.
again," and then he ran in the next play.
Yeah,
It actually happened a couple times, and then also fumbling.
he's
But
he's not big, like he's skinny
he's
guy.
mhm,
So he's very electrifying, kind of like how Lamar is, you know. But at the same time, Lamar protects himself so much better.
yeah,
And I think Jaden needs to, watch some of Lamar's film to kind of figure out how to do that. But yeah, I think that 28 points is, not necessarily even his ceiling is if he can get a touchdown and through the air, if he can get the ball moving. And that was his first game. And now he's playing a worse team this week.
right.
Like Tampa Bay is actually pretty good. So I think that that's another thing too. Who is, are you ready for the puke?
Yep.
Which one would you like
And
to talk
again,
about first?
we're not really gonna play him this week. And just to we'll just segue because it's in the same game. But Daniel Jones, and it's awful to say, we probably won't have any lines in him, but it is worth noting he's playing against Washington. They're the only team that had more than three passing touchdowns allowed last week, and gave four to Baker Mayfield, who probably had the best performance of the day from a aesthetic perspective at quarterback. Daniel Jones looked terrible. He's looked terrible. I understand why, this sounds silly to say, but the last time these two teams played, it was Tommy DeVito playing, and he had 270 and three touchdowns, no
Yeah.
turnovers.
Uh,
And so it's like, I understand the concerns, but he's got cheap receivers. Wandale Robinson, 4,300, 12 targets last week. Malik Neighbors, obviously, is the hype rookie. He is still under 6,000.
mhm.
Easy to double. Good game environment. You could bring him back with a Brian Robinson, who's 58, I think, and be very happy with the lineup that you could do. Um, it's worth noting we probably won't be getting to him in any of the lines that we build, but don't be surprised if he has about 18 points. And then if you have 18 points and you're 5,300 as a quarterback, that's
That's solid.
3x.
Yeah, definitely solid. I wanted to piggyback off of what you were saying about Washington's defense. They gave up last year 30 and a half points per game. That was five more than anybody else, basically. And truly, that's just a number that, like we talked about Sam Howell. And how is he supposed to play in an environment where he's got to do that and deal with that? Like, it's just Daniel Jones, you can say whatever you want. He's still an NFL quarterback. He still has pretty good receivers at times. If you look at, just his work and stuff, Wandale Robinson's really good. I actually have liked him for a long time. And then, of course, adding Malik Neighbors. I just, I don't think it's impossible to say that he goes so say he throws two touchdowns and scores a rushing touchdown, you're gonna need him almost.
Right.
And all of a sudden it's like uncomfortable because he does have the upside with his legs. He did not show it last week. He had 15 total yards, but he does have a floor through that, which is good for if you're gonna play somebody.
Exactly. And I mean, we're not far removed from one of our favorites, Al Smizzle. Always kind of looking forward to playing Daniel Jones in good spots and wanting to draft him as a QB2. And we were just like, cover our eyes and just,
Do it.
we love you, but I don't want to listen to you. That's kind of the same thing
Yeah,
of this. And I actually looked, same resource, DFS Kitchen on Twitter. He's actually 7% owned, and
yeah,
he's one of the five highest owned projected quarterbacks according to that list in
that's
particular.
crazy.
So if that's the case, maybe
Then
we're not going to pick him.
yeah,
But again, good game environment, and he's got very affordable options to get to, and it's pretty clear and concise who he's going to. Also, Darius Slayton is out, so that's just more opportunity for that. And then also Theo Johnson,
that's what I was gonna say.
yeah, 2,600 starting tight end. He had most of the snaps last week as a rookie.
So we talked about that on Wednesday
Mhm.
or Thursday when we released our other video, but Theo Johnson had 61 snaps, 86% of the snap count, while Daniel Bellinger, who we actually expected to play most of it, had 23% of the snaps. So we do know that Theo Johnson is the number one. They're trying to play all the rookies they can. Tyron Tracy, when he comes back, will start over Devin Singletary, and we'll just have 3 rookies out there at their skill positions. So don't worry about that. But yeah, so he's an option to pair. It's just it's gross, but it allows everything.
It
And we
does.
don't like cheap running backs. Well, until the CMC news, I guess we didn't really have like a true cheap running back. We were like going after. Now we do, but like there's a lot of $6,000 and of course then spinning up running backs that I like, and Daniel Jones allows those guys into your lineup.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really a ton of skill players on this slate that just are buku bucks. I mean,
Right.
the highest, obviously, like Cooper Cup is going to be chalky if you just want to go there. Yeah, there's 3 guys that are 8,000 and above, and 2 of them we're really not getting to. Amon Ra,
Yeah.
Tampa Bay had a really good performance. Obviously, you don't want to have everything with those numbers because they were thrown to Terry McLaurin and nothing else. And so obviously they were number 1 against receivers last week. CMC is obviously on IR. JJ, they should be trailing against San Fran, but I I don't know if that's not really what I want to get to. However, if you want to do a bring back, because obviously everybody and their mom is going to play Jordan Mason today
Yeah.
at 5,200, really easy to get up to, especially if you win a cheaper route with your double stack bring back to get to. And then also CeeDee Lamb, Marshawn Lattimore is actually a true game time decision. And
Yes.
so if he is indeed out, that's another, positive game environment for CD to potentially, return
I wish I had his
value.
stats in front of me that showed how often he played outside versus in the slot, because I know that he moves around all the time,
Right.
and so that would have been good to have. But I do not. One other quarterback before we get off quarterbacks is, where is my puke? Oh my goodness, where are you? There he is. Justin Fields playing against Denver this week. Favored, but he has the rushing upside, and that's what you go for. He had 14 for 57. He also had a fumble. Not sure what's going on there. And
they're not losing the
he was
fumbles,
his percentage was really good. He didn't throw the ball that much. It's still an Arthur Smith offense,
Yeah.
but at the
And
same
we
time,
expected Atlanta to have one of the best secondaries after
right?
their 2 additions in the offseason. Yeah, he's going to start. George Pickens is still affordable. Pat Fryermuth was extended, had a mediocre, lackluster week 1, but he's kind of more affordable. I think he's 43.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
I know I said Jaden Daniels is the only guy that I would really kind of truly consider no stacking, but this game environment I really don't want to get to. But he's cheap enough that if you're last man in, you want to correlate and you just need a couple $100 and you want to go down from a Baker or a Matthew Stafford,
Right.
I am completely fine with it. This is beyond a floor game, honestly, to me, because they had six scoring drives and they didn't have a single touchdown. Chris Boswell had 28 fantasy points last week. Kaker won. And so even though I see this being a lower scoring game, I don't think that he'll just won't be involved on any kind of, rushing upside or opportunities again to score. And just one touchdown brings that up to about 18, which is 3x.
Yeah.
Just imagine a second one or a rushing bonus or something like that.
And he's obviously more than capable. He needs one rush to take off and separate himself on the slate at 5,400. I'm probably more comfortable with Justin Fields than I am Daniel Jones, but
I don't fault you for it.
I'm not against but I understand why Daniel Jones is being brought up. Let's go to running backs and we'll talk about them. And then we'll talk about some pass catchers, of course.
I mean, if you watched our first look main, there was like a slew of running backs in the 6K range, like 6 straight that are just all in good spots. And that's kind of really what I want to get to, because on top of, Jordan Mason's going to be in majority of lines today. If you did want to pivot because he's probably going to be like 40% owned and be a little bit underweight, there are a lot of reasonable guys to get to. Starting off, though, before we even get to there, Jonathan Taylor. 7,700 against a team that allowed 3 touchdowns total to Saquon last week. He was actually a pepper to be early in the week to just score.
Yeah.
And that was part of our first look on prop betting, because it's just like, how do you not project a touchdown for a guy in the best matchup that it seems
Right.
early this week. 77 is not that difficult to get to. Very inefficient last week, but he did score. Uh, the biggest thing is just kind of he needs the double touchdown, but multi touchdown upside, or he just needs to be much more involved in the passing game because they were
Mhm.
essentially trailing the majority of the game and he still had 0 targets. So that's a little bit concerning. But I know that they were playing catch up and the deep game was the only thing that was really working um, for Indy. So we'll just kind of see. But we definitely want some sprinkles of JT today.
No, I'm very excited about JT today. I think that he's going to be, if I'm going to stay down low on my receivers, like pricing wise, JT will be a guy that I'm going to try to be getting to. I think that also there's another guy, like it's really hard to find a guy in Green Bay you really are comfortable with because they are playing Malik Willis. And we didn't even talk about him as our puke because he's just like, he has no upside
His
in my.
his career passer rating in 3 games is 39.0, and that is worse than if you just spike the ball every single play. So that's just kind of why we're not getting to him. I wouldn't be shocked if Green Bay actually won today.
Interesting.
But
What a thought. What's the well, it's only -3.5 or
it's
something,
two and
right?
a half.
Yeah, it's not worth it
So
then.
it's definitely not worth any kind of wager, and I don't feel comfortable at all about it. But just kind of worth noting.
Yeah.
Um, Brees Hall is going to be very chalky today,
Yep.
and we just would rather not get to him. We saw what they did to the Bears last week. Their front four is one of the best in the league, surprisingly,
Mhm.
if you believe it or not. And Brees Hall, obviously, he's got a ton of pass catching upside. He had 6 targets last week. Um, he's going to be a bell cow. 74 is one of the cheaper prices you're going to see on him the entire season. But I don't know. We prefer other matchups this
I'm
week.
funny enough, I'm comfortable saying that I want to play like Brees Hall's touchdown prop almost, but at the same time, like if I had to pick between Brees Hall or JT, I'm just taking JT.
Yeah,
So it's like that's what's dampening my ownership to Brees Hall is just the fact that I'd rather get $300 extra and play JT.
exactly. If it's only 300 within and one's a bottom 5 matchup versus the current top matchup,
Right.
why not just go up for that guy? Um,
But yeah,
but
I think like you said, Brees Hall though is going to be extremely
in terms of the non-Jordan Mason players, he's probably going to be the most popular running back
yep,
in my estimation.
I agree. Let me see. I have some stats here. We have 23.4% expected on Brees Hall.
According to Roto,
Yeah, quarter roto.
yeah,
So
and I would expect even higher than that.
yeah, I agree. That's full tournaments. I mean, if you're just looking at guys that are getting most of the exposure, it's Brees Hall and Jordan Mason are the top two, and then some guys we're about to talk about in this fun 6,000 range. I think there's so many guys in this range. We Jameer Gibbs is our thumbnail, I believe, on this video. So
Hmm.
we're going to talk about him, of course. Isaiah Pacheco, because Cam and myself, we think that the game between Cincinnati is going to be super high scoring. If you want to take the Cincinnati side, say you want Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, it's not crazy to think that Isaiah Pacheco is playing well, and he can be your bring back
I mean,
in that
Ramondre
game.
went for 140 yards and a score last week against them, and this is a much better team and
Right.
situation, and they're at home, and um, yeah, it's really hard to not like him a lot today. And then also the pass catching role, having he only had 3 targets, but 33 yards receiving. That was kind of what helped salvage his day a little bit because really before that touchdown, he was not really panning out
Right.
as a fantasy asset, and then he got put over the top because he scored. Yeah, we like him a lot. Like I said, I even am willing to use him as a second piece as a double with Patrick Mahomes, who right now should be the most popular quarterback on the slate. And if people are going to be doing Patrick Mahomes doubles, probably going to be involving Kelsey or even Xavier Worthy.
Mhm.
And if you just do Pacheco and Rice, that's a little bit different.
Right. And I will say, like, if you're gonna do a secondary stack where you go with the Rams and Arizona game, and you say that's the game I'm gonna target with my quarterback, you could always do a Pacheco and Yoshi Voss, who got 100% of the snaps the other day
Right.
in the first game. So that's always an option. Looking at some other guys though, this will be the only time I ever. Oh well, let me skip him actually. Let's do Kyron first. Kyron is in that game that we talked about, the Rams versus Arizona. So he is an option, of course. I think that if you want to get off of some of the Cooper Cup uh, craziness that will be happening on this slate, because he is way too cheap for the
So
fact,
yeah, with Kyron, I brought up, this is his 2 game scripts from last year when he played Arizona. He had 158 rushing yards and a touchdown. Didn't have any passing work, but they were up 3 scores, and so that was kind of why. The second game, because he missed 4 games after that, he came back for Arizona, and we were like limited touches, but we were hammering him. He had 204 yards and two touchdowns, both receiving,
right.
and so broke the slate for 30 plus fantasy points, and great spot. Problem is he has no O line, and I mean 2 guys. Steve Avia is their best lineman. I probably would assume. He got put on IR. Joe Notebloom
Yeah,
was
no
also
boom is
put
out.
on IR. Really, the only thing is Rob Havenstein had a full practice on Friday, so maybe he plays. But other than that, like they could be missing 4 or 5 offensive linemen, and
But
it's just a tough thing to trust in that regard because he was really inefficient last week. Obviously, 2.8 yards a carry. That's not his doing. He was hitting the backfield basically every time he touched the ball.
yeah,
Um,
the difference is Arizona's defensive line is terrible. In my, like in my opinion, like their front seven is one of the worst front sevens in football.
mhm,
So I guess maybe I boost him just for that reason. Because if they can't pass block, that's one thing. But a lot of O linemen, they're built to run block, and then the ones that get paid a lot of money are the ones that can pass block.
mhm.
So these are the backups. Hopefully they can at least run block. I just think, if you're not gonna play anybody from the Rams and you don't want to get Cooper Cup because of the exposure that he's going to get, which is going to be insane, I think Kyron is perfectly fine, and he's cheaper than Cooper Cup is right now.
Right.
And he's in this range of running backs that we're just going to talk about. I mean, I'm going to just kind of gloss over some, but like Derrick Henry is in play because
Great
he's
matchup.
against the
Great game
Raiders.
environment.
Jameer Gibbs, we'll talk about him in more depth because I want to go past him. We'll get to him. Josh Jacobs against Indy.
If you
He's
want to
the
bring back
only guy. He's the only guy
only
Indy's
guy
got.
and the most rushing yards out of anybody last week was Joe Mixon with 159, I believe,
Mhm.
and that was against Indy.
Yep.
And so that's truly the guy. If I'm going up to JT and I want to correlate the game,
Right.
because he's 65 and it's a great matchup.
Yeah.
And then James Conner, obviously, against the Rams, you saw what David Montgomery and Jameer Gibbs as a combination did to um, the Rams last week. So he's in play as well. He was a bell cow. He had the first 6 touches of the game last week.
Volume is
Volume is
king.
king, and he has pass catching upside, 64, very reasonably priced.
And this game is actually even right now. It's not.
Even,
No one is favored. So he's kind of a $5 running back.
yeah,
Kind of a
4.75.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's almost a $5 running back. So he's interesting. Rashad White, we're not playing him, but if you wanted his pass catching volume, he's an option. I'm going to be away from him, but
Again, Detroit won they were number 1 against running backs last year in terms of fantasy scoring. They basically stifled Kyron, and Kyron would have had a awful day if it weren't for him punching one in at the very end. But you saw him averaging 2.8 yards a carry and then 1.3 yards a catch. So Rashad White last week was about 2.5 yards a carry,
2.1.
but he had 6 receptions for 70 yards, and that's what
Look at that.
75.
Look at
And
this.
that's what kind of has that MO. And he gets 16 points anyways. So if you expect them to be trailing, they're a touchdown dog.
They'll be throwing the ball.
That's the highest total on the slate. So if you don't want to spend up to Mike Evans or Chris Godwin, I would assume because he didn't really move up in price, he should be somewhat popular. He's a reasonable guy to get to, and then another running back that is worthy of being double stacked with this quarterback.
Yeah, don't expect any rushing upside. I actually took his under on rushing upside, and I'm telling you, you could possibly play him because he might have 7 targets. And that's the thing. That's the only reason we talk about volume. Well, volume in the passing game truly is where you make your money, and he's a guy that gets that. Let's talk about the thumbnail. Let's do it. I think this is a reasonable spot. I mean, he's just going to get all the passing volume in this offense as the running back. He had 6 targets last week, 34 yards. Meh. He's going to get, probably 12 to 15 rushes a game. And this game, like we've talked about, has the highest total.
Mhm.
So he's a guy that definitely we should be getting to.
Yeah, so last week, Tampa Bay actually allowed the most receiving yards to running backs. They combined to Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson Jr. had 7 for 101 in the receiving game. And
Mm.
that didn't count, the 50 rushing yards in addition that they allowed to them rushing the ball. And most of their production in the ground was taken away from Jaden Daniels, who had 88 yards of his own. A lot of opportunity for him. Highest total, highest implied total, all that. I just think he's in a great spot to smash today. If it's a PPR league, he's probably one of the best plays on this league.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's gonna have, the receptions, of course. And I think personally, like he's starting to creep into,
And he was starting to get some goal line work. Sorry to
yeah,
cut you off, but like
he was.
other than David Montgomery for overtime, essentially just like ruining my day again. Essentially, he was a non-factor in the second half through it being a close game. David Montgomery, I believe his overtime work was like his first touches from like early in the third quarter, like the 10-minute mark, and then all of a sudden he gets 5 of the 7 touches. 2 of them were to Jameer Gibbs as well. But other than that, Jameer Gibbs had multiple goal line touches,
So
and he punched one in on a really incredible effort when he did punch it in.
I have the stats here. There were 10 goal line plays for Detroit. 6 of them went to Jameer Gibbs, and 4 of them went to Dave Montgomery. And I'm betting most of those
The
were
final
in
2
the
were
final.
mhm,
Yeah. So that means we're gonna get, some more goal line work from these guys from Jameer. And if that's the case, he's just a guy that you want to get on your team as much as possible, in my opinion.
right. Yeah, when he had his like kind of hamstring aggravation,
Right.
there was no concern. Like they immediately were like, "This is not a week 1 thing." And I know you have to take everything with a grain of salt because even us, we didn't realize that Christian McCaffrey would be put an
Serious. It's
IR
so
candidate
serious.
for
Yeah.
this. But it sounded like he also had a setback as well. But with Jameer, he fell into the mid second round, and we were just like, yeah, sure. Like, why not? He's got the upside. I actually think this is the year that running backs just kind of revitalize fantasy because it's too skewed to wide receivers based on the ADPs we saw. And he was one of the guys that just kind of was starting to get disrespected. And
Right.
obviously, Saquon, we were just like very against him going above Jameer. Right now, that seems somewhat silly because he had the best game of week 1. But I still feel that way.
I think primetime Saquon might be different than regular every week
Mhm.
Saquon because he's got another primetime game this week.
Right.
And so, like, after these 2 weeks, like, I think it should probably go back to if he gets a 12 o'clock game on a Sunday. Those games are very different than primetime games, in my opinion, for him. The next guy I want to talk about is this guy. We talked about him a little bit earlier. We can get back into it. Washington, if you want to single stack Brian Robinson, go for it. I think it is perfectly reasonable. But he still is going to be the workhorse in the run game. He actually split almost directly down the middle on snaps. It was 54%, I believe, for Brian Brian Robinson was 54%, and Eckler was 52. 56 and 53.
Mhm.
So, I mean, they're both going to be on the field at times together, but I think that Brian Robinson is definitely in play this week.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron Jones in his debut with Minnesota, and this was in a game that was already out of hand by halftime.
Yeah.
Like we had some shares of Justin Jefferson, and he was doing well because he scored, and then just was not targeted in the second half because they
Mhm.
were ahead so much. Aaron Jones on 16 touches had 109 yards and a score. Obviously, didn't get the bonus because um, just fell short, 6 yards short. Ty Chandler also 3 for 25, notably on through the air. I mean, the Giants are just going to be dissected this year, and they have a really solid pass rush, and that's essentially all that is the bright spots of their defense.
Yes.
And Brian Robinson, we targeted a ton of in best ball because of his upside. He actually is a very underrated pass catcher,
Mhm.
and everybody thought that just because they brought in Austin Eckler, oh, he's going to be just the pure pass catching back, and it's just like Antonio Gibson was the pure pass catching back, and he could not keep Brian Robinson off the field when the the game mattered.
Exactly. Yep. And I mean, we talked about it earlier. Like Austin Eckler went in and played and got what 3 targets, I believe, towards the end of the game.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, all of his passing game work was like when they were down 3
one
scores in the
drive,
fourth
right?
quarter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
one. It
essentially.
was yeah. So I don't expect that to really cut into Brian Robinson's workload. Let's go just talk about the guy that matters the most. It is what it is. Jordan Mason is underpriced.
And it's just purely because these prices came out as that game was going on.
Yes.
And then obviously before CMC was ruled out and put on IR, 52. He's going to be chalky. 40% owned. One of the highest owned running backs.
Well, I guess my question is, are you going to eat the chalk? Because I'm going to. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I
not
mean,
even worth.
there's no reason to. He was given 29 touches in his basically first start, and
Yep.
I just don't know why you would go away from that. And that was with Debo, who they were using a healthy amount of as a running threat as well. He's under 7,000 too, and he should garner some ownership as well. I don't think that Brock Purdy's under my because there's so many good quarterbacks and good matchups this week.
Yeah.
I'm not really prioritizing Brock Purdy as a double, but basically pick Jordan Mason. And if you don't have Jordan Mason, probably find a way to get Debo. That's kind of how I would approach this
Yeah,
slate.
I think Debo still gets probably 9 rushing attempts,
Yeah.
6 to 9 rushing attempts,
What
which
did
gives
he
him a
finish with
really
last
cool
week?
floor.
He
I don't know, top of my head.
he had 8 carries
Yeah,
last week,
there you go.
and then
Okay.
he also that was in addition to his 9 targets. So basically 17 opportunities, only had 77 yards.
Yeah.
But he scored, and he's gonna be a slate breaker on matchups like these.
Right. Let's do some since we talked for the most part about the run through the running backs, obviously. We're gonna go through the receivers, but we're not gonna really touch on every receiver. We're just gonna go real quick because um most of your receivers are going to be paired with your quarterbacks naturally.
Right.
So let that just happen. Don't overthink it. But some guys we haven't really talked about, you know, we haven't really talked about Jamar Chase. And talking about him in a game environment that we believe will be really highly scoring, he's still one of the best receivers in football, if not the best receiver in football. And I know that that's controversial, but like
Mhm.
when he's good, he's like really good. So
Right. I mean, yeah, obviously in his rookie season, he had 11 for 266 and 3 scores. We're far removed from that. That's a lot of years on the football years that were 3 seasons ago. But if this game stays close, it's going to be because of him and having a breakout game. I kind of had that feeling that he will, but not confident enough to just jam him in all my lines, especially when Cooper Cup is 100 cheaper.
right.
And, spending double at receiver today is going to be tough when we like so many running backs in the 6K range.
Yep. It will have to be a spin down at tight end option.
If you went that route, yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. Going through these guys, Marvin Harrison, we talked about a little bit with Arizona. You're gonna, if you want Kyler, you might want to do have Marvin Harrison again.
He's going to have next to no ownership.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was gonna say. He's basically a huge pivot off of the rest of everybody, because no one wants him with
This
1.4.
is this is a pure example of just like people overreacting to a certain performance or slate and just completely disregarding what got him to this point to be as hyped as he is.
Right.
Um, like it's kind of very similar to we had a guy in our league who spent over 50% of his fab on Isaiah Likely and then traded away Mark Andrews. And it's just like that's that's so overreactionary to what actually transpired in the game where Mark Andrews was more snaps,
Right.
more route participation. He was just doubled, and Kansas City was like, if you're going to beat us, you're going to check down to that guy. And that's essentially what they did the entire slate. So, yeah, very interesting in that regard. And then obviously right below him, Debo Samuel, I just brought him up. 17 opportunities. You don't get that often as a receiver. Obviously, Cooper Cup, 21 targets last week. Even for him, that was an anomaly. He's usually hovering around, 13 to 15. With Debo, 17 potential touches, a lot of it on the ground as well. The only thing that kind of hinders is his, receiving or rushing yard bonus because unless he breaks one, he's basically going to split his yardage in half in both receiving and
Right.
rushing. But multi touchdown upside, he should be very very involved, and he's only seven or under 7,000. very easy to click on.
Yeah, he's one of the best yak players in football, so that's why he also makes a lot of sense if he does catch the ball. We talked about Rashee Rice. We can go into him, of course, but he's going to be Patrick Mahomes' number one option. I don't think there's much to say. We're going to plug him into a lot of lines, especially if we have any Cincinnati or Patrick Mahomes in our lineup, of course. Zay Flowers had a ton of targets. Let's see. There's the Xavier Worthy price. Do what you want with that. He is a guy that I think will probably get a ton of ownership, though, because of the fact that he did so well last week. And we talk about overreacting. Well, there's another guy you can overreact to right there is just like saying, oh, this guy had 3 targets and a rushing attempt. So he had 4 total attempts, but he made the most of them, you know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, great game environment. There's also the narrative of DBs talking smack of, oh, he just is fast.
Yeah.
And then it's just like typically Kansas City likes to exploit, bulletin board kind of material.
Right.
So I could see him having a 70-yard touchdown just because
he
that
is
DB
just
said
fast,
that.
though. He is just
fast.
We talked about that all offseason when he was getting drafted. He wasn't in our top, 8 wide receivers, but he went to the perfect opportunity for him. My problem is he actually just scored on a busted coverage. Otherwise, he had 1 target. 2 targets. And I'm just like, I need more consistency before I decide to put him in 20% of my lines. And I think right now he's probably going to be in 20% of the field.
Oh, yeah.
So he's an interesting guy, but I'm probably going to stay away this week.
The trio, Godwin, Reed, and Neighbors, very interesting as well for all different reasons. Godwin purely in the slot, just as they hyped it up, and he scored twice, or scored once rather. Very interesting option, especially if he's scoring and he's back to the Chris Godwin of old. He's been dealing with a couple injury seasons, and then obviously with Baker coming in, he really didn't have that great of a connection last year. But this new slot role, going back to that, should kind of help with that regard. Jaden Reed is going to be Debo light today because Malik Willis, they're not going to be expanding the field. Reed should have had 3 touchdowns last week. One was called back because they lined up 12 guys on the field
on both sides of the ball.
And it wasn't. Yeah, it was weird. But yeah, he had an incredible game. He's been dealing with like a shin injury that he was questionable for, but it sounds like he's going to play. Worth mentioning, if you wanted another bring back option, he's like the only other guy that I would even consider
right
in that range. And then Malik Neighbors, great game environment. Washington, again, they gave up 4 passing touchdowns last week. And he's going to have the occasional boom week, and this is the game environment that will help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, guys, tell us who y'all's favorite while we go through wide receiver, because we're going to start building lines after this. We'll talk defense and tight end and do it quickly, but tell us who y'all's favorite guys are that, for this week on this slate that might not be somebody we've talked about so far, and maybe we can address them and just see what if we missed somebody or something like that. If you do go with the Washington stack, Terry McLaurin is interesting, of course, because he is supposed to be the number one, but he just has to get the volume. But as I go down, it's really like there's some really cheap guys, of course. Let's get to Christian Watson's down here. That's Jerry Jeudy's down here. Deontay guys, there's not very many guys you're comfortable with, but guys that we've seen be good at football before.
Yeah, I mean, the 55 to 4,500 range in receiver, there's really no one I'm even getting to today.
Yeah,
it's kind of spinning up or spinning way down. I mean, I would just completely scroll past this. The only one of note
that's fine
is Greg Dortch. Obviously had a great game. He is up now to 4,600, and then Rashid Shaheed, I think the same price or 100 above. He had his breakout performance again last week. On a 59-yard touchdown, ends up with 16 fantasy points. He was in the optimal millionaire maker line, stacked with Juwan Johnson.
Without the quarterback.
It's
just something else.
That was how weird last week went. But we were high on him. And so if you think they're going to be trailing from behind with Dallas and gets beat over the top, he's capable of doing that. Again, we mentioned Wandell, 4,300, 12 targets last week. He's going to be the true slot guy and number 2 in this offense.
He's kind of like the safety valve. Like Daniel Jones he's going to run a 3-yard route, and Daniel Jones is going to throw it to him when he gets uncomfortable. And that's kind of how it feels.
Right. Yeah. And then right next to him at 4,300, Michael Wilson, also great game environment. He scored the only touchdown or passing touchdown for Arizona. Only had 5 yards But again, it should be a game where they exploit somebody. So I don't know how many people are really going to get to him. But if you just want a last guy in that's just part of a good game script, he's a potential candidate as well.
I think that game last week was just kind of a fluky game for Arizona and Buffalo because Buffalo, they put up 31 this week against Miami and Josh Allen scores 9 points. Brandon, let's see. Brandon says, does Alan Lazard get anywhere close to production of last week minus the garbage time touchdown?
Well, he ends up becoming a top 5 receiver on the week because of his multi-touchdown, because he also had another 50-yarder as well. All of that came after halftime, and half of that came with Tyrod Taylor.
Right.
And so I think he's going to be a guy that is because he had 100% snap share. And obviously, Mike Williams was a non-factor. We faded him. He wasn't even a thought.
Good job.
Because we just didn't think he'd be that involved. Alan Lazard was. He's going to be more popular, and I'd rather just spend 100 more and get Tyler Johnson.
Let's just say, Brandon, he is on our wide receiver, cheap wide receivers list. So we have thought about him. It's just not necessarily
he's one
something
of
we're
the
comfortable
probably
with.
top 3 candidates below 4,000. But if I was to choose between him and Yoshi Voss, who also had 100% snap share, who's going to have less ownership in a better game environment, I'd rather go him. Again, Tyler Johnson, 69% after Puka went down, and he had tied for the second on the team in targets with 7. And we can't expect that Cooper Kupp's going to have 21 targets again. If he does, that would be incredible for our lines.
But can we expect that Matthew Stafford's going to have 49 passing attempts? Is another thing too. But the next guys that we're going to talk about are A.D. Mitchell. He has a very flat stat line, but I will tell you what, there are 5 targets here, and 3 of those were 2 of those were touchdowns for 40 plus yards, and then one of them was a 40 plus yard throw on the sideline that Anthony Richardson just missed. Three of them. Anthony Richardson had 47% completion rate last week. We're talking about how good he is, right? Well, we need some help if we're going to go with A.D. Mitchell. We need him to hit the passes just like he did with Alec Pierce.
Yeah, and as I looked it up a couple of minutes ago, there is no update, but Josh Downs a true 50-50 game time decision. So if he is out, that just helps him even more. And he's the one, if you are even considering somebody to stack with with Anthony Richardson, A.D. Mitchell is very reasonable, and I don't expect a lot of people to be on him because a lot of people early on in the DFS community just kind of box score watch.
Yes.
And so, yeah, very low owned guy, very easy to correlate, but it's just just kind of depend on what you want to do down low. One thing I will say, like I said, the 55 to 45 range is just not really where you want to live this week at receiver.
Right.
It's really going below that once or even twice, or going up, in the 6K or even double stud receivers in the 7Ks, because there's just so many. We didn't even mention Mike Evans, who had 2 touchdowns last week, and against Detroit, who he had 2 touchdowns and over 100 yards in the NFC divisional round against them last season. So that's another great one to even think about as well.
Yeah, if Josh Downs is in, I will not be playing A.D. Mitchell because he is the main slot guy, and A.D.'s been coming out of the slot. So I think that I would just kind of fade it until I know about it more. Talk about Rams. There's a guy.
Yeah, he's the other chalky one. He had 94%, you said, snap share.
I'd have to get it again.
He also, with Tyler Johnson, had 7 targets. He was just less productive with it, but completely reasonable to get to. I'm not fading him in any means today. It's just, if you have somebody that has similar, upside, but 700 cheaper, it's just easier to fit other things. I don't see either to have a extreme boom, but Demarcus Robinson has also been a guy where we've been like, he's the guy to get to this week, and he has not panned out. But he had 4 straight games to end the season last year with a touchdown. That's why he was such a hot topic in late rounds of best ball drafts. But, I just don't see him having a continuous role. And while Puka is out, the 5 to 7 weeks that he will be, I don't think he's just every week going to be second or third on the team in targets. I think it's just a hot hand approach. And again, the thing is, Cooper Kupp, again, you can't expect he's going to have 21 targets a week. And it's going to be spread out more. And if he can have 21 targets and his wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3 each can have 7, that's pretty pretty solid environment to prioritize.
Absolutely. Looking at he had 92%.
92. Okay.
92, yeah, of the snap count, which is a ton. He's gonna be in the on the field as much as possible. The next guy is Yoshibas. He's right here. He played 100% of snaps, and he was 3,000. So even at 5.6 fantasy points, you're still happy with that. Honestly, he still pays off.
Yeah, and he increased 800, and people looking at a box score saying, "Oh, only 26 yards. I don't really need to have him this week." He'll probably cut his ownership into a third
Right,
this week and be probably under 10%. Yeah, great game environment. He's even easier to bring back if you can't get up to Chase. But really, Chase and Yoshibasa are the only two I'm even thinking about bringing back if I'm doing a Kansas City double.
right. And then I really don't know where to go past that.
I mean, I would say let's just kind of get into some line building because everything else is just a complete dart throw
Yeah,
in the 3,000 range. Other than obviously we didn't go in depth to Alan Lazard, but again, 100% snap share, had 2 touchdowns, all in garbage time. But this they should be ahead, and I don't know, all of that when everything just comes in one spurt, it's kind of concerning to me because he really just had the first target that he dropped, and then
the
nothing until the third quarter.
right
So
for sure.
that definitely it's weird to get to. Defense is going to be tough this week though. Last week terrible call. We went Carolina and
Yeah,
just basically 100% of them, and they were the only team to really have negative points, I believe. This week there's not really anybody in the below. You typically just want to click a cheap defense like below 2,500. All of these are teams that are probably going to give up 30 points. I mean, I don't see Carolina. I'm not going back to the well with Carolina.
no,
They need to show me. And then also they lost their best defensive player for the year in Derek Brown. Um, the
oh,
Vikings,
actually, go ahead. Sorry.
against San Fran. If you're projecting the Vikings to win and maybe San Fran struggles a little bit, maybe they're probably of this five, the best
Mhm.
option. Obviously, they played well against the Giants, but it was the Giants last week. Saints touchdown dog against Dallas on the road. No, thank you. Bucks against the highest implied total on the slate. Again, no, thank you. And then the Raiders against the pissed off Baltimore team that almost found a way to win against Kansas City. I just don't see any chance that the Raiders kind of make this a game today. And it is the biggest spread on the entire slate. And then again, even above that, Cincinnati, we expect a high
Playing
scoring
KC.
slate. Green Bay, okay, if you don't believe in Anthony Richardson or
Right.
this will be a lower scoring game, sure, but yeah, I mean, really, it starts getting interesting in the 2,700, 2,800 range. Is there anybody that really kind of sticks out to you?
I guess so we talked about the Titans and the Broncos mostly. I actually think the Patriots stick out too, because if you if you think that they are still good on defense, and they have been, defense has not been their problem; it's been the offense. Um, I think that they're interesting at 2,800 because I just don't know who to play here. I think
Mhm.
my most confident pick is probably New England right now, though. Funny enough,
Really? Okay.
yeah,
Well, and it's also interesting because typically we don't spend up on defense,
right.
but again, there was only 3 receivers above 8,000, no running backs above 8,000. So there's not really, if you wanted to go double dom, you can go a bunch of cheap guys at receiver, or obviously Jordan Mason as chalk. We didn't even mention J.K. Dobbins, who's
That's
against
what I
the
was gonna
Panthers.
say. Yeah,
He had over 130 yards in the score in his return from injury. You can get up to these higher defenses. Let's kind of go through the very, very top just to kind of mention. I mean, Dallas had an incredible game against Cleveland last week. They're at home. Creating turnovers. We still think that the Saints have a bottom three line in the league, and Carolina just couldn't exploit it. So Dallas certainly will. They had a ton of pressure to Deshaun last week. They didn't really get to him as much as his pressures, but there was at one point where he had like 37 dropbacks and like 21 pressures.
right.
So
I
Dallas smash spot, especially in a redraft league.
I think personally, my favorite, like just like full glance, is
Hmm.
by far the Chargers. By far,
Really?
like I mean, they're playing Carolina.
Okay.
I think that's where I would go. They can create turnovers too, and
I don't know. Again, if I was
like
doing
those
a
are
spin up
awesome.
on defense approach, I think the Jets. the Ravens and Cowboys. I know they're all expensive, but all of them are in smash spots. Really, the only one that I would even fade just because it's San Francisco, and it's because a lot of money's coming in on Minnesota to make it a sneaky game. And if you're just going to follow a trend, like Pittsburgh's going to be one of the low scoring environments. Again, Chargers aren't a bad play, but I'm just saying if you have money to spend up and it's just like any of these and price doesn't matter, I don't know if they're in the top 3 of these 5.
I don't know. I'm pretty confident that the Chargers. Well, I mean, Carolina looked awful. Chargers game script is going to be rushing the ball and probably trying to grind it out as much as possible. That's why I kind of go there. But creating points, fantasy points, I think you're correct though that these other teams actually have a higher ceiling. I just could see a situation where Carolina scores 7 points, and we're at a point where they need a couple sacks, and they're pretty much 10 points for that game.
Very fair.
But yeah, so which defense would you like to just plug in? Well, no, let's start somewhere else because we can kind of build, I think, defense at the
Yeah,
end.
I think usually I like to plug in a defense and then figure it out.
Exactly.
But with there being so much uncertainty on defense, let's see if we can kind of spin up to one of those on some first looks. So I'll let you go first. What is the double or at least stack bring back that we're going to target in this first line?
Well, I think you're probably going to go KC, so I'll let you have KC. I'll let you build KC.
Okay.
Let's do the chalky one. I think I'm going to go Matthew Stafford to start it, and then I'll go Cup, of course. Which other receiver would you like in that game?
Like I said, we didn't mention him at all on the first look, but I really like Tyler Johnson at 33. And if he's going to be 6% or less owned, I just want to get some shares of him, especially if we're only playing, 5-6 lines. One of them will be more than double the field.
Fair. Absolutely. I think this becomes an interesting conversation now, though, is like, because I definitely think a bring back is important with Arizona. And there's some options. There's a bunch of options. We could go James Conner. We could go Marvin Harrison. If you wanted to do that again, you could do the Trey McBride route.
I think my favorite two are between James Conner and Trey McBride. And obviously, there's way less tight ends up top. We didn't even talk about the position, but Sam Laporta is 63. It's really hard to get to.
Yeah.
I understand if you want to. Kelsey, potential bounce back spot. I actually have seen some ownership come in on him. Trey McBride, like I said, led the team in targets. Good game environment to look at for him. You see a couple outs because Ferguson's out, Njoku's out, Hawkinson obviously still on IR. Kittle maybe.
Yeah,
probably not for me today. Ingram, we're not getting to that game at all. So essentially, you can go all the way down. If you didn't want to go Tyler Johnson, we can go Colby Parkinson. But again, I think that Colby Parkinson and Cooper Kupp is going to be the way that most people do doubles when we go Stafford. That's why I wanted to get a little different with Tyler.
Yeah, I think that this is a cool start to a build, though.
Okay.
Which game would you like to do next?
I mean, we have to get some Kansas City, Cincinnati.
Okay. Well, we probably will need a running back.
Okay. Well, let's start at running back.
You okay?
You know what? Let's we'll put in the thumbnail and we'll go Jahmyr Gibbs to start, and then obviously I know you were going to the chocolates. Also put in the chalk as well.
Okay, we'll put the chalk in. This will be chalky, like I said, to start this one. Cam's non-chalky.
You can have half your team be chalky and be
because
a completely
it's NFL.
unduped line because it's the NFL.
So I like this a lot. How this already started. We of course might not get a Tampa Bay or a Minnesota player, which is fine. We are very comfortable with Jahmyr Gibbs this week, and Jordan Mason should have all the chalk. What do you want to do at wide receiver here? We have about
6,500 per
6,000.
Shoot. Let's see. I mean, we're gonna have a ton of Rashee Rice. Do you want to avoid him in this one, or do you want to just plug him in?
Well, let's see what happens.
Okay.
Let's start with it. 4,300. You could get basically for Cincinnati. You could go Yoshibas, but then you'll have enough for your defense.
So if you're gonna go expensive defense, then this is going to put you in the low 4,000 range. So you could go Yoshi in an expensive defense, or you can try to go the cheap 2,800, then you got about 5,800, and we might try to find a way to get to one of those couple of receivers that we mentioned: Jaden Reed, Chris Godwin, Malik Neighbors.
Yeah, that's fine. So let's do Yoshi then, and then see where he gives us.
Yeah, we'll have basically 800 remainder on that line if we went Yoshi. And also, I mean, honestly, if you wanted to, in this regard, if you wanted to go all the way up to Dallas, you still have enough to get off of Tyler to get up to Demarcus Robinson.
Yeah,
Fine doing that if you wanted to do that.
not against that. You think Dallas is the best play? I don't hate it. I mean, I think they make the most turnovers. And
yeah, I think Dallas is the best play today. I mean, they have like 6-7 sack upside, in my opinion. And if you can get a couple turnovers and then also keep them under 13 points, possibly, that's in for a 15+ point day, and it's worth looking at.
I mean, I really like this line, and I didn't know what we were gonna see when we wanted to spend up at defense, but like you said, the pricing just makes a lot of sense today. I think we're gonna get to a stack in a second that'll be a little bit more expensive, and it might be a little bit harder. But this, with the Stafford stack and Cooper Kupp being way too cheap, I mean, he is just needs to be over 8,000. That's not even a question. I think this makes a lot of sense, and you get to spend up a tight end. I mean, that's
right. Yeah, and even if we wanted, I think actually on this next one, we'll spin down at tight end. But yeah, that'll be our first look. I don't know if you wanted to. Well, I guess we'll plug in our final lines later and then put it in the Discord. If you haven't joined that, please do. We'll be talking all day with props and winners, and hopefully a lot of winners with everybody today. So let's get to that. But I actually was going to go with the Ram stack, and I don't mind going the Kansas City stack. So let's start with that.
Well, that's interesting. I thought that was definitely going to be the other way around.
No, it's all good. I just like the being able to get to a ton of cheap options, and we didn't even mention Colby Parkinson. Like I said, if we did multiple Stafford lines, he's probably going to be in one of them, just because you have to get to some of him.
So I did that. I think you're okay with that.
Yeah, that's the only way to start this line if you're going Mahomes build.
Now what?
I don't know. Like I said, I want to go cheap tight end, so I'm gonna actually put Pacheco in as the secondary.
Good.
And then we're gonna spin down at tight end. Like I said, this is one of our favorite props of the weekend, and he's 4,400. He did not go up in price, and he was a top 5 tight end last week.
Are we gonna do something that I'm not comfortable with?
I don't know.
I think then I'm not gonna. I won't do the bring back on Kansas City. I'm gonna bring the back on Baltimore, and I'm gonna do the guy that we have no shares of in best ball, because he's just in such a good matchup this week, and I think he's probably going to be overlooked because that 6,000 range is so nice.
Yeah, that'll definitely make things difficult though. But we'll try to make
definitely
it work.
Defense is going to be cheap.
Obviously, we're gonna have to go down on defense. Let's click on the defense next, and we'll pick one of our favorite cheap ones.
Titans, Denver.
I'm gonna put in Denver.
Okay, perfect. I think
because I actually am picking them to win. They're the lowest total on the slate.
We're both picking them to win. So yeah, no, I agree. That's fine.
Okay, so
yeah, now we have some money.
Let's get weird.
I think
we have to put in Cooper Kupp. I can't avoid him today.
I think then I know where this is gonna go, because I think I'm gonna put in the other chalk on the other side of this game, or on the $5,200 guy down here, and too little. All right,
yeah,
so we're a little high.
That's why I thought it was gonna be tough. If we were gonna go Derrick Henry, we can't get Jordan Mason.
Interesting. So that's okay though. Hey, you want to be different?
I mean, obviously the bring back would be Yoshi in this line. With the prices I have left, he's 3,800, and then that's enough for any of the 4,000 guys if you want to go that route.
41.
Wouldn't have anybody for Arizona, and we would be fading the Detroit and Tampa game, which is scary as well. Actually, I don't know if I want to bring back with Derrick Henry.
He's just a little expensive.
Jahmyr Gibbs is 100 expensive, or 100 cheaper. If you wanted to go there. But with Mahomes, it's really easy to plug in Jordan Mason.
Yeah, let's do that. Know. Yeah, I think he just makes it work.
We might need to even go cheaper at tight end in this game.
Well, we could go down to 3,100. Oh, but then we'd have both two Rams.
How about some Luke Schoonmaker? today.
Oh, doing something crazy. Okay,
Let's
we
get
didn't really
weird.
talk about him, but yes, he
I
will
mean,
be the starter
Dallas
for Dallas.
Dallas
And
tight
they're
ends always kind of do well. He's 2,900 today. I mean, complete shot in the dark, but you got to get kind of tournamenty somewhere. And he's one of those guys because he's kind of sandwiched in between like a Greg Dolchich, a Theo Johnson,
mhm.
Kobe Parkinson. I don't know if he'll be pulling in more ownership than any of those guys. Maybe Greg Dolchich, just because that's a bad game environment.
Well,
But
if you're gonna try to make this a little bit more tournament liney, I'm gonna do the same, and I'm just gonna go ahead and put this guy in.
Marvin Harrison,
Yep,
get a bring back going.
because truly, you could get a running back or a Debo who has a higher floor. But if you wanted to get the bring back against the Rams, I think it makes sense. You could literally plug any of these guys in. If you took Marvin Harrison out, you could go. Well, let's see. You could. I wouldn't. I mean, you could go Garrett Wilson, Kamara, if you wanted to. But truly, the guys we're going to be targeting are Marvin Harrison, Kyron, Debo, Derrick Henry, Jameer Gibbs, Josh Jacobs, like all these guys in this range. James Conner, if you wanted to do the bring back, you give some extra money. But yeah, so I'm going to put Marvin Harrison in just because I can in this situation, and I'm not locking this line in or anything. But it's just fun to look at
Just
for
another look, yeah.
to look at for everybody.
Okay.
And then do you want to do one more with a puke? Nice fun puke.
I don't know if do you want to be pukey or
I'm
I mean we can.
I'm more of a Jaden Daniels in this
Yeah,
situation because
I
I
want to
think
make
that's
a line with
interesting.
Jaden. I don't know if I want to even stack him, but I just want to have a line with him
Okay.
and figure it out.
I think we
And
need to.
so I want to start. Obviously, the first two clicks in this line are going to be Cooper Cup, and if we've done two Jordan Mason lines, we have to do one Debo line.
Perfect. That's fine with me.
So start with that, and then see what we can do from there.
Okay.
And fade the chalky Jordan, but we got a chalky Debo,
Cooper is
and
going to be
obviously,
super chalky
yeah,
this week. Okay. So how about if we're going to do this, we go James Conner as our
okay.
bring back. I think that,
Yeah, like I
he's
say, he's one of my favorite too. If you had to rank him today, I'd probably say Trey McBride because of lack of elite at the position, and then James Conner. But it's just because in terms of overall fantasy points, he has the highest upside of the three. But it's just because there's so many good running backs in the same price range that
right
have good matchups, and
for
that's
sure.
why he's ranked behind Trey, who really is only fighting with Kelsey and Laporta, who are even more expensive than him. That was just kind of my thinking behind ranking them all, and then obviously Marvin Harrison. He is the tournament
Yes.
of any of those guys. He should be less than 3% owned today.
It's going to be fun. Where would you like to go next in this line?
All right. Well, tell me. I mean, with this line,
Defense
what do you
will
want
have
to
to be
do?
really low.
I want to know what you're doing at tight end. Are you going high? Are you mid price with Bowers? We almost put in Bowers and then faded him, or do you want to go cheap again with like a
Let's go Bowers.
Okay.
Let's do Bowers. I think it makes sense.
Alrighty.
I think this might be a line where we can do defense too. It's going to be
So
cheap
if
defense.
we fade Jordan Mason, we're probably gonna have to double. We're gonna have to spend up a running back again.
What about Brian
And
Robinson?
then double punt. Yeah, I mean we can if you wanna look at that.
Well, I mean I'm just asking. Which defense? Because I think we're gonna have to go down.
Well,
On
you
this
said
one.
you like New England earlier, so
Let's do it.
let's just. I think this is a week to just sprinkle defenses. I don't think it's we're truly confident one. Our confidence has been shattered after last
Defense,
week,
yeah.
so just kind of do some sprinkles. There's about 5 or 6, but there's ways to spend up on defense this week, which is won't be that often that we will see that.
Yeah. Which running back do you want to get to if you don't want to go with a Washington running back?
I mean, we haven't built with JT yet, but I don't know how we can with this build.
It's not impossible,
It's not
but
impossible. It's not
not
fun.
pretty.
It's not pretty. Jameer Gibbs he just keeps speaking to me.
Okay.
I don't want to go heavy into Pacheco today, but I do like him. And then obviously we haven't played a Josh Jacobs line yet, but he's worth mentioning because he should get a ton of volume today.
Which receiver do you want? I guess probably Yoshivas, who just makes everything okay. Or we could go. I was gonna say really low because we're gonna have to almost because we don't like the 4,500 to 5,500 range is the problem.
Yeah, I mean,
So
even going down all the way to like Lazard or Tyler Johnson
it,
doesn't
yeah, it's not
open
gonna
up
help
to the
us a
6,000
ton.
range. So we would have to, you know, bring it back with Malik Neighbors, which is I'm not against. Um,
Fair enough.
or you can go Wandale. We haven't brought him up since we went through our, position by position. But again, 12 targets for somebody 4,300 is worth noting, especially if they're going to have less than 10% ownership.
4,900 is where you sit. It's
It's a
JSN,
gross
Brian
range.
Thomas. It's not a fun range, but it's or you could go quarterback. I don't know how that's possible. What is happening there? Bucky Irving. I don't know. It's not really a comfortable range.
Yeah, but and then if you went down to Yoshi, you could afford like a J.K. Dobbins or say screw it and just
Yeah,
put
that's
it
true.
back in Jordan Mason.
Double it and just say go for it.
I don't know how many lines.
We'll have
It's
both.
interesting because people like make weird lines. Obviously, we saw somebody win $1 million double stacking without a quarterback. New Orleans players last week. Doing it with San Fran feels a lot better, but I feel like most people are going to be playing one or the other, or they're going to be doubling.
Right.
So I
For
don't know.
sure. So something like this is kind of cool. You could always go down at tight end. Like that's a thing that, we haven't really like if we wanted to just move Brock Bowers out of there and go down at tight end, we wanted to put him in this line because we just faded him in the last line. But yeah, he's an option. All these guys are guys we're willing to play. JK, like I'm not against this line at all. Everybody in here is somebody I'm willing to get to for sure. So do you want to jump to the next slate?
Yeah, so we got about 22 minutes until inactive list comes out. Haven't really seen any alerts for big money today, or like big relevant stuff, other than what we kind of expected. So I'll keep an eye on that as we go. But yeah, let's jump into a fun slate.
Let's do early only then.
Okay. Which
Let's start
that's going to
only
take
only.
out a lot of obviously two of the three highest totals is Cincinnati, Kansas City, and then the Rams and the Cardinals. That is not on the slate. So really, you got to prioritize Tampa Bay,
Tampa
Detroit,
Bay.
and then also Washington and the Giants gets a little bit of a bump by default as well.
Okay, so where do you want to start with this lineup then? Which quarterback?
So what I want to start with is that tight end.
Ooh,
Because
okay.
Kelsey's off this slate and McBride's off this slate. So really, it is Laporta or just go cheap. And Brock Bowers is sitting there at 44, and so I think he's the main tight end if I'm going to play one early only line that I want to get to.
Yeah, let me see what defenses we have on this. We still have the Patriots and we still have the Tennessee. So
Or we're just spinning all the way up essentially.
To 4.
Yeah,
So.
we'll see what we can do, but obviously you got to click on Jordan Mason if we're doing one early only.
Yeah, for sure. This will be our. Where is he at? There you are, down here hanging out. Like you said, we don't have the chalky wide receiver.
Yeah, no Cooper Kupp
which
as
is
well.
always good, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Takes away that. Where do you want to go at quarterback? Because I think that's an interesting topic.
Jaden Daniels is probably the best raw.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
If we're trying to correlate a little bit, I like, and we didn't even mention his name earlier, but Baker Mayfield, off his 4 touchdown game, double stacking him with Mike Evans, and then either Rashad White or Chris Godwin. Probably Chris Godwin because there's a bunch of running backs that we like. That's kind of my idea of it. If you want to correlate more, but if you just want to get weird,
raw points,
just raw points, then we can just go ahead and go with Jaden.
Let's check this out because we already showed a Jaden line. We haven't done a Baker line, and I think that game we haven't talked about enough. Even knowing I think it's hitting the under, it's okay. Like it's still going to be a game that gets both teams probably get into the 20s.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess because of all the 7,000 receivers that are no longer on the slate, we can go ahead and you want to put in. We're going to bring back obviously with our guy.
Okay.
Here.
Can I? Let me throw that guy in there.
But I was thinking Mike Evans. Are you
try to double it? Okay.
Yeah, doing a double.
I don't see why not. We have money.
I mean, there's nobody. The only other expensive receiver I really want to get to, if we could, is Debo. But
but
we'll just kind of see what we can make from this.
I think that we could go with like Neighbors here. Um, didn't read. Eh, it's a weird. Yeah, I guess Terry McLaurin. If we want to. Oh, well, we're
Put
not
in
playing.
one of those two cheap defenses real quick, and we'll see what we have for the last two spots.
Let's go with the more expensive one, and
Let's
if we
go.
have to go down, we'll
So
go
we go
down.
58 per. Um,
Is there a cheap wide receiver that you really like on this slate that makes us like have all the money? Because I think I would love to get to JT. Like, let's see. Because
he's 77,
yeah,
so we would
if I
need
plug him in,
3,900 or lower.
dang, that's close. I wanted it to be a little more than that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Dang it.
I mean, really, the only cheap guy that is even worth mentioning is Alan Lazard.
Bye, JT.
Yeah, we're not
See
going to
you
be able to
later.
fit him.
I wanted to. I think this is a 3 running back type of line.
I
though.
think we could definitely fit JT in a Jaden Daniels line just because we're not going to be
Mm-hmm.
probably getting to Mike Evans.
Right. Then what? Where would you like to go? With,
I
because
think it's worth getting a. Let's see. There's the Derrick Henry. There's the Josh Jacobs.
Well, yeah, you could get that right there because we did try to do that earlier and it didn't work out.
49.
We love this $4,900 range. But what if I went? Is there a wide receiver that you are willing to get to? Let's do the 4,000 AD. Do you want? If we put AD in there and then I went up $900.
So if you wanted to make it fit, right, you could go with 8. Well, actually, never mind because I don't want to get both AD and JT. That wouldn't make sense at all.
No, it wouldn't. But I think AD here, and then we go up at defense to I said the Chargers, but Ravens are on the
Ravens are there.
board. We do have a Raider, but I don't think it's gonna matter. He's
On early or smaller slates. Rules don't matter as much. So
something like that. You get the correlation between running back and defense. You get the Baker double stack with the Detroit bring back. You get the chalk, and then you get a correlation here also, and then you just play a cheap wide receiver who has a lot of upside. Like we are missing out on that upside right now, and I don't hate this line. Is there a different way you want to build it?
Just for reference, what is the price of a Brock Purdy in this? 61. Yeah, I can't do it.
No, that's too much for me.
Both Debo and Jordan Mason went off, and he had 10 fantasy points. So I just can't
stomach that.
Can't stomach that.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, so that's our only early only. But I think if you wanted to build it with Jaden Daniels, it makes a lot of sense. If you wanted to build it with Anthony Richardson is up there, who we talked about earlier. And you can also always go down to Daniel Jones if you are feeling frisky. But I would, I'm just not there. I want to be there. I really do. But I'm just like, he just is not good at football, in my opinion. And I need him to be better at football before I go for that.
One more, I guess, update doesn't really have to do with the slate, but just kind of significant injuries of first rounders in fantasy leagues. But Christian McCaffrey, this is both according to Ian Rappaport, he could need as much as 6 weeks to heal from his tendonitis. So it's just kind of a frustrating injury that's just like can't do anything but just let it rest kind of thing, which is kind of, it's always frustrating when there's nothing you can really do. And then Puka could be out all the way until week 9. So essentially half the year.
We had a conversation yesterday. I was talking to the guy that's in our league that has Puka, and I was just like, I just don't know if I think he's gonna play. And that's like honesty. That wasn't like trying to trade or anything. Like I'm just like, I do not know that I think Puka will get on the field.
Right.
Like this is a very difficult thing, I think. And it's re-injury is a problem and all kinds of stuff. So this slate's very interesting. This afternoon only slate right here, because there are a lot of games we want to get to and a lot of prices.
Really fun.
A lot of prices that are higher. Which quarterback do you want to start with? Because we literally there's all of them for the most part.
Really, there's only 2 quarterbacks I want to do for an afternoon slate because you're going to have to double, and I'm going to go either Stafford or Mahomes. Let's try with Stafford.
Cool. Sounds good.
And then obviously you put in Cooper Kupp, and then I'm going to let you pick your favorite second option, whether that's DeMarcus, Colby Parkinson, or Tyler Johnson.
the fact that Trey McBride is still on the slate is going to deter me from going to tight end probably right now.
Okay.
Um, let's go to Marcus.
Yeah, and if we need to spin down, we can.
Yep, we'll move him down. Okay, so which Arizona player do you want? Because I
Trey McBride.
left the tight end spot open.
No, definitely Trey McBride on this one.
Then we can kind of go to running back. I think that there's a lot of running backs we really like.
Well, actually, even I don't know if I agree with that, just because like we talked about Pacheco, we liked Kyron, and we like James Conner. Getting two of the three, I don't think you can get all three on this slate because there's so many good receivers to target. But if you had to rank those three up top, how would you view it?
Well, since both of them are on my fantasy team, I would love to have Pacheco and Kyron. I think honestly though, I think the touch upside for James Conner is something that can't really be overlooked.
Mhm.
I think if I had to pick between the three, we're gonna have to have some KC, of course, but I want to get James Conner probably, especially because I save a little bit, and then oh man, I don't want to triple with Kyron. I don't think, even knowing I think it's viable. I
That's
just
fine.
don't think I want to. So Pacheco.
Okay, Pacheco, and then with receiver, obviously we're not going to triple bring back. So I think you just need to click on Rasheed.
We're coming down to it though. Let's go see what defense looks like. Make it.
I mean, Denver is
easier.
kind of the easiest one to get to.
Yep, we talked about them on our other slate, so that's good. And then 3,600.
So
should I go triple with the Rams? Is the question, I guess. Then
either that, or you can just go down from Robinson to Yoshi to bring back Kansas City, and then you can just have some remainder, but go with Tyler Johnson.
Yeah, exactly. I think that makes sense. 38 for Yoshi. And then go back down to 3,300. Who's up here, anyways? Just wondering. Irvin Whittington. No, okay. Tyler Johnson. Hello, rat. I don't know how he's still cheaper than Jordan Whittington.
Yeah, and on small slates like this, especially, I know we mentioned some double tight end stacks last week that didn't pan out, but especially on a 3-gamer, it's very reasonable to, especially if you got a 3,100 in Kobe Parkinson. So if you have more confidence in him than Tyler Johnson, by all means, we won't be against it at all. He probably is going to project higher on any projection that you have available to you, especially RotoWire. I bet you he's the highest value on the slate, and then Tyler Johnson, because he's technically the wide receiver 3, he's probably going to be projecting about 6 to 7 points.
Right. Good morning, Gary. I'm glad you got here and come to hang out with us.
Please
come hang out, man. One thing I will say, this is the perfect slate. You have 2 games that are going to go over 48 points, and then you have one game that is like dead bottom of the barrel this week at like 38.
Yeah, so unless something weird happens, I just don't see a way that any of those defenses pan out that are in the big 2 games. So either go Denver or go Pittsburgh, and then build your line around the other 2 games. That's kind of how I would approach the afternoon only. I actually feel better about the afternoon only slate because we're doing so many of our lineups with these kinds of guys.
Right. And the quickest response to like how do you make this lineup like more affordable? It's just change your tight end because your tight end's at 6,000.
Yeah, if you don't believe in Kelsey or McBride, it'll sting a little more because there's no mid tier. It's basically you're punting the position or you're going all the way up. Because look, there's 6,062 all the way down to 41, and then all the way down to 31.
Right.
That's the 4 options that you got, really, unless you are going to root for Mike Gesicki, who's also 31, or Greg Dulcich. But the premise is the same. They're all at the tail bottom, or you're just going way up top. The only thing is just kind of like if you do that, who are you going to try to get to?
Right. Absolutely. I think I was probably going for Kyron if I was going to do that.
Right.
But it didn't work out. But you know what I mean? Like it's just you can do this and at tight end, and it'll change your lineup to fit whoever. You can go Kelsey here. Funny enough,
I really honestly wish there was a cheaper running back that I'd like, just so we can try to get Chase. But I mean, if you look at the running back position, it's like Zach Moss and Chase Brown.
Javonte
maybe
is on there, but like he's playing.
Javonte is not projected well.
In Najee, both of them are playing tough defenses
Jaylen Warren,
for the most part.
So
like
it's really rough, and I don't have enough confidence in Chase to need him to where you have to eat just a mid tier running back.
Right, of course. Well, let's do the KC stack because this is actually by far my favorite. My favorite of all these slates is this one right now, even over Maine. So let's
So with this
get
one, I actually want to put Kelsey in as well as Rice.
okay.
So in that regard, basically make the decision of if we want a triple stack with a Pacheco or if we just want to make that our easier decision on running back, and then instead of Pacheco, go Kyron, and then also James Conner.
Right.
And then yeah, it's easy
Let me just
to
put
click
that guy
on.
in
He's
there.
like the only
Cheap
one of the
guy
only
that
cheap
I'm
guys.
worth
Yeah,
with getting to. I probably want to get these two to start.
that's fine. Yeah,
And then
like I said, I on the afternoon slate, I would just pick 2 of the 3 and then just figure it out.
mm-hmm.
Defense wise,
I
kind
was
of the
gonna
same
say.
premise of just can you get up to 35 or just go ahead and do the 28.
And now we have 51-50 for
Mhm.
2 players. Making it, Cooper Cup's not in our line yet.
Oh, we're just short if we went.
Oh man, we'd have to go down somewhere.
So, yeah, we need to.
Would it be here?
So the easiest way that I can,
Hmm.
yeah, when you get up to Mahomes, you really have to kind of make some decisions. So if you don't love Kyron and potentially, hopefully, he can just have 1 touchdown and just do okay.
Right.
Who of these middle tier running backs do you trust the most? I guess
This
is it
guy.
Najee?
Yeah. I think so.
And it doesn't correlate, but again, I don't care. It's a 3-game slate.
Well, it depends too. Do you think Javonte's going to have the passing volume? Because Jaleel's down here at 4,500 and he makes everything better.
Then let's go Jaleel.
And he's got 5 targets. He had 15 opportunities.
Yeah.
And so let's
He
do
had
that.
1 yard on 5 receptions.
Let's do that. When you get on a slate like this, why not plug in some random weird guys like that? It gives you 5,000. Does that help us?
I don't think it does, honestly.
No way. That sucks. Okay, so we won't put Jaleel because we can.
So if you had either Najee or Javonte, who are both 55, that easily allows you to get Demarcus Robinson.
Yeah, I was
at
gonna
4,000.
I was gonna put him in so that we had him, but I can't find him when there's all these running backs. Let's go to this one. He was the only wide receiver, and then we can put in either of these guys.
I mean, Najee had 21 opportunities last week. They're favored today. I understand it if you want to go him, but to technically correlate our line better because we're picking Denver defense and we're picking Denver to win. Javante's probably the better one. He'll probably be lower owned of the 2 as well because he had ended up with less opportunities than Jaleel last week anyways.
Yep. No, I think this makes a lot of sense actually. So
a lot more gross.
It was a lot more work for sure, because of the difference in price. Like you get this 6,000 versus the 7,000, and that gives you enough to almost get up here. And then somewhere we found $300. Travis Kelce wasn't there. It was Trey McBride. So I think the line we made first will be super chalky, and
even with the 500 remainder.
Yeah, but I think it's like the line that people are going to go to. But yeah, so I actually loved that slate. That was fun.
Let's check out some primetime because there's a couple of huge, significant injuries that we need to look into, and then after we'll do this one, we'll do
the captain
one. Maybe we'll get some injury news by the time we're done with this primetime. But essentially, obviously, Roma Dunze sprained MCL. I think he will not play. He didn't practice all week. Keenan Allen is a true 50-50 game time decision, which is very interesting. But either way, DJ Moore is in a smash spot against a defense that were beat time after time against Anthony Richardson. Problem is, Caleb Williams debuted and didn't have 100 passing yards. So it's kind of scary, but DJ Moore very affordable in this slate. And then also A.J. Brown on the Monday night game with Philly, late pop-up on the injury report, and he did not practice Saturday, which is the final practice of the week, and he is a true 50-50 call. Because they have a short week since they have a Monday night game, they'll be playing on a 6-day rest. I would probably opt to sit him if he's a true 50-50 if I was Philly. And in that regard, that just kind of really elevates Devontae Smith. It gives me more confidence in a Saquon. After that, I don't really think anything else excites me with Philly.
That's fair.
That gives me confidence.
I think we need to talk about which quarterback to get to first.
I mean, it's tough.
It is because Chicago, great defense. And they showed that when they won last week and had what 17, basically their own 17 points.
Mhm.
Um, Atlanta, I don't. I mean, okay, like if you want to take the rushing upside, truly, it's going to be gross to most people. But I think that Chicago, Caleb Williams makes sense.
I think going against the Graham makes the most sense. I don't think, especially if say Keenan doesn't play and it's just DJ Moore, I feel like nobody's gonna want to play Caleb
Mm-hmm.
on out of these four, and everybody basically it's gonna be like 40% Hurts, 40% Stroud, and like 12% Kirk Cousins because he's easier to stack with. Um, that's just kind of my thoughts on it. But also, like, how are we going to get cheap on this slate? Because, like we
Um,
mentioned with Chicago having multiple receiver injuries, they elevated Colin Johnson. You don't really elevate guys days before if you don't know that at least one is going to miss.
mhm.
And so I'd expect, like I said, Rome to be out. Collins minimum price. He had a really solid preseason. DeAndre Carter also minimum priced. Rayburn McLeod 7 targets last week.
I
So
think Jahan Dotson, like you said, is interesting if AJ Brown's out.
DeAndre Carter,
DeAndre
like I was
Carter
trying to
is
mention,
out. Yeah.
23% snap share. Um, Velus Jones is considered a wide receiver on the depth chart, but all of his touches came as a running back. What's interesting is that Roshan Johnson, on according to RotoWire, is the highest projected value on the slate when
Hmm.
he's minimum price. So if you have any kind of stat projection, you'll be the highest value. What that means to me is that they're probably going to try to say, "Hey, Roshan Johnson, I'd rather have in the game than Tyler Scott."
Hmm.
So with that being said, Velus Jones, we're going to move you to a slot role or be involved more out wide, and then just have the three-headed monster that we kind of predicted would take place this year. But we'll just kind of see. I actually don't even know because Roshan was missing most of the preseason with the toe injury, and then he was a coach inactive last week. So that's kind of a wait and see for me. Obviously, I'm not really looking to play him, but it really kind of correlates with if you're trying to fit one last guy in, and we did go the Caleb route, wanting to get a second cheap guy or a secondary player for the double. Which cheap guy we want?
Gerald Everett's an option that
Yeah.
we haven't talked about because he does. I have the stats. I'll pull it up, but I know he's been playing more than
He just had
Cole
one
Kmet.
one target for 1 yard last week. That was my thing.
I know, but they kind of sucked last week all over. Like the whole offense was just terrible. So I just don't know like how much I'm going to put into the first week.
All
It
right.
also. So
Well, let's start somewhere. Your call first.
well, I think I'm gonna go with Jalen Hurts as like if we're gonna go with like a normal play.
Okay.
I think he's the most normal. He will probably get the most
The problem
ownership.
is, I don't know what you're going to want to do at running back because there's three studs at 7,000. I feel like we got to spend for two of them
Two
because
of
I don't
them?
want to
Oh
play. I'm
man.
not playing
Yeah,
DeAndre
you're
Swift.
right. Mm,
And do you have confidence in Khalil on this slate? I don't know. So it's not a good game environment for him. And then below 5,000, there's not a Jaleel McLaughlin potential upside play.
yeah. There's really not much on this slate. Yeah, but how do you build without going up at quarterback?
Well, let's try to do it because obviously, let's pretend that AJ Brown's going to miss. So you have to plug in Devontae Smith.
It's fine. He's actually reasonably priced, if you ask me.
Hmm. And then
Um,
obviously Saquon, you got to play.
yeah. Okay. And then it's got to be Joe. I don't think you can play Bijan. You need to save that 600 probably.
Okay.
Um, it's a lot of fantasy points in the first week. My goodness. All right.
Yeah, it was.
Um, and then reasonable wide receivers to get to.
There's one guy in the between 4,200 and 6,100, and it's Tank Dell. He's just really easy to click on. He's probably going to be popular, but I'd rather kind of get down to him on a slate like this. Obviously, last week I said I wanted to avoid him, and he was the wide receiver 3 for his team in terms of production. But he did have a lot of air yards.
Yes.
All it takes is one play for him. I think for defense
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
purposes, I think Chicago's the one to click on this week. It's either Chicago or Atlanta, in my opinion. And Chicago, I'd rather just get to because I have more of a confidence that Atlanta I'm sorry, that Chicago can hold Houston to struggle more so than Atlanta to hold Philly, because
Yeah, I
even
think
though
that's
Philly
fair.
struggled and turned the ball over 3 times in the first half last week, they still scored 34.
Right.
So with Houston, if they have a really good defense that forces turnovers, maybe this is going to be an uglier game than one would expect. And just go the cheapest guy, and hopefully they can get you 5 points, and anything else is butter. But I don't know how popular. I think it'll probably be pretty split down the middle for defenses, and I'd rather just save a little bit of money.
Fair enough. I think then if we're gonna do this, let's go look at tight end because I think that's an interesting position. Brevin Jordan is it kind of interesting. There's just nothing comfortable.
I mean, how are you going to bring back Philly
I guess it's got to be Kyle Pitts.
if you're not going to Bijan? Because
Yeah, that's
we're not
true.
spending enough for Drake London when we also have to play DJ Moore.
How much is Drake London? 61. Yeah, if I put DJ Moore in there, we're over.
Yeah.
So,
So that's why I'm kind of like, we kind of need to spend down at quarterback.
and I know we're high on DJ Moore, but I think there are lines you can make without him for sure. So if we were going to
So
make
a
a line
Chicago
without them,
defense, but no skill players from Chicago.
I mean that's just a low scoring game, right? Is that what
Mm,
we would just consider? I don't
no,
know
I don't think that
what are
that's
the
something I would do when Houston could have had 400 passing yards to
no, yeah, for
Anthony
sure.
Richardson.
I just wonder what the totals are too, like because I'm actually more comfortable in doing like a without, like I don't know.
So the totals
Mm,
for these two games, Chicago Houston is 45, and Atlanta and Philly is 46.5. So fairly close. But the Chicago game, like, I kind of had the hunch of which defense is more likely to potentially stifle the opposing offense. It's probably Chicago,
right.
but then there's just nobody to play at 5,000.
Yeah, this is a tough slate. Very tough slate. Um, okay, let's try it with
Just
Caleb,
take out, or just don't clear it, because I'm gonna be having most of those guys anyways. Just Caleb, 66. You get DJ Moore.
and that's
You get the double.
all I wrote. All she wrote.
You get the double. You get a Tank Dell bring back, and then obviously Houston, 2 players against the defense, but it's a 2 gamer. It's
Yeah,
not that big of
it's
a deal.
very tough on the slate for
I
sure.
really would. I really honestly want to find a way to get to Bijan if I could. Um,
From Joe,
mhm.
I agree,
Because
but
I think Bijan will be less popular. Obviously, Saquon and Joe Mixon were the 2 highest scoring guys of all running backs last week, getting 36 and 29.8 points. So with Bijan having the so-so, but having a ton of work in the passing game, they're touchdown dogs. I just expect that he will have a better game, and he's the least owned of the 3, in my opinion.
so I took out Kyle Pitts because we went Bijan gives us the Atlanta, and I missed out $100 on Goddard,
Hmm.
which would have been great. That would have made me more comfortable. I
Yeah, I
mean,
mean, another. If you went all the way down to a Brevin Jordan,
not against it.
if you did do that, you could afford either quarterback up top, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Yeah, 7,300. So getting Brevin and Tank Dell, it's kind of gross, but you could do that, or Hurts and
I would probably go
Hurts
Hurts
by him.
because we're playing the defense against.
Okay, then yeah, I guess that's a way to go with a Philly double.
And if you wanted to switch it, you would just do that, and you would get Stroud. So I think that's an option for sure. The problem is what happens when. See, I don't really like this slate. I'll be honest, because it's
Really?
just really
Okay.
hard to kind of navigate. I think that it'll be difficult because what happens if AJ Brown's in? You get the wrong. Say you
I
get the.
truly don't think he will play.
That's fine. That's fair. But you say you get the wrong wide receiver from Houston, and you needed Nico Collins this week, and you know it's just. I think that this range makes it hard because you have to go with 2 of these running backs,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think that that's a little uncomfortable because you could plug in Kenneth Gainwell and him accidentally fall into the end zone, which would be gross. But I just don't like this slate. I think this slate's a little bit more difficult than I want it to be.
So officially inactive, notable guys. No surprises, but Jameson Williams active, Jaden Reed active. Officially inactive, Jordan Love, Kenneth Walker, Jake Ferguson, Josh Downs is out. So if you
Okay.
want AD,
AD.
be fine. Marshawn Lattimore, like I mentioned earlier, for New Orleans, the corner, he is out, and then DJ Reed is out as well. And then yeah, it's just going to be depending on who to navigate. One guy we didn't mention because of the Kenneth Walker news, Zach Charbonnet. He was actually priced up to 58 before.
Way too expensive in my opinion.
And I mean, he did not make the most of his opportunity last year. So I don't know if he is just all of a sudden going to be good at football. Like Tank Bigsby sucked last year, and then all of a sudden we want to
Right.
give him some efficient touches. That could be a route to go. They're against New England today. They should be a favorite. It would be a 5 box potential running back if it weren't for them being on the road. Worth a sprinkle, but I'd rather spend up on every running back in front of him. And if it's the same price, I'm going Brian Robinson over him every day.
Right. Kenny McIntosh is the backup. I don't think he has any value either. Zach Charbonnet is played 34% of the snaps when Kenneth Walker was in. So, and I don't believe he was efficient with them. So, I don't know. It's not a fun pick, I guess. I think there's better running backs in that otherwise. What would you like to build next, if
So
anything?
let's do the showdown.
Okay. For
Sunday night game.
the Sunday night? Okay.
Obviously a little early for the Monday.
With that,
Plus the AJ Brown
yeah,
is
I
so
was gonna say.
significant that I can't really even make a first look until I know that information. But Atlanta is just kind of like assuming Rome is out, will Keenan be out as well? But you're probably not going to get to him even if he does play.
Right.
And him playing doesn't really deter me from a DJ Moore. So that's kind of how my thoughts are regarding that.
I cannot believe that Joe Mixon is the most expensive player on this slate.
I know.
Blows my mind.
I think DJ is the easiest click at captain because he's only 9,000 regular price and 13.5. But if you don't like that, then that's okay.
We can build that side though. I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Caleb Williams obviously would go. They correlate. Which of the Houston guys do you want? I think it's. I mean, Tank Dell is pretty cheap. Like
I wouldn't
that's
say he's cheap. He's just kind of like the one guy that's like a mid tier price because after Keenan, there's nobody between him because I think Roman's going to be out. And then I don't even know who the next guy would be. Dalton Schultz at 56. So between 8,400 and 56, there's one guy in 7,400. That just probably means he's going to have even more ownership.
I think there's some mispriced guys though on the Chicago side down here, so we can definitely make some good lines. I bet.
Like I mentioned before, Roto currently has Roshan Johnson, who is $200, the highest value. Again, even if he only has a catch for 10 yards, that is double the field, and that is exactly what you want if you have 200. But I don't know if this is a high enough scoring slate to where you need to do that.
Right.
But yeah, let me pull up the values for that game.
22.25 is what his value is. 22.25x.
Exactly.
So they have him at 4.45 fantasy points on Roto.
But after him, it kind of gets more reasonable. Tyler Scott, who's 600, he's going to project well just because. But I just have doubts because he was a coach's decision inactive, and they're also bringing up Colin Johnson. Like, why would he just all of a sudden inherit all of the potential touches? Yeah. So I don't know what else would you want to go here? Obviously, Velus Jones, 1,200. He got 3 touches last week. And then DeAndre Carter, who had 23% of the snap share.
I'm throwing him in there for sure.
Gerald Everett, who 2,400, but he had more snaps than Cole Kmet at tight end.
Well, I think right here you could kind of just like looking at pricing, you could do this, and I was wrong on pricing. No, I wasn't. I mean, you could do the Dalton Schultz like side.
That's not bad.
No, I don't hate that. I think that there's probably a better, more comfortable way to build it, though. I mean, I like 3-3, but it's because of Carter that makes it okay.
If you went all the way down to Tyler Scott, though, you can afford instead of Dalton Schultz, Tank Dell.
Okay.
So that I think is kind of exciting. Oh, actually, I was wrong. I apologize. I
Oh,
was
we're
100 off.
$100 off. Oh, of
But if
course.
you went down from Nico to Stefan, you can
You good?
afford it.
Yeah.
If you wanted to go that route, that's a reasonable 3-3.
Where are you? There you are.
I just Joe Mixon at 10-2 is kind of tough.
Crazy.
Kind of tough,
Yeah. Because
but
he
it could
could.
be an ugly game to where his 16, 15 points is enough.
Right.
I don't see this being just multiple guys having 25 points
Mm.
shootout. And then where are the defenses in terms of pricing and kickers? Because those kind of are always worth mentioning as well.
Fairbairn's 48. Santos 44, 4,000 and
So honestly,
30,000. Those are pretty cheap.
both defenses are kind of cheap. I would definitely this is definitely not a game to double defense. But if you wanted a sprinkle of one or the other, Houston for 4,000 against a team that didn't score an offensive touchdown and then are going to be missing at least one, but maybe two of their
Right.
top three receivers, definitely interesting.
Let's
And then Chicago, they had a punt return and defensive touchdown last week to essentially win the game for Chicago. So they're 3,000. I don't think many people are going to be on them because they're a touchdown dog to Houston on the road.
Yeah. I think if you do go to the Texans, it's probably going to be a 4-2 or 5-1.
Exactly.
I would put in CJ,
I would put Tank Dell at captain just to get some space.
Captain Dell.
11-1. And then you could probably afford. I still think you got to click DJ regardless, right?
Yeah, I know, I agree. And then you
You get enough
still
for
get
some Dalton.
Dalton, yeah, or whoever in this range. You could also take out.
That's a 5-1 build. So
Yeah.
that's if you're heavy into Houston, that's completely
Right. No,
formidable
I
today.
completely, I agree with this. If you are the Houston side, you think they're going to win by 2 touchdowns. I think that, in this build, almost taking like with these many receivers for Houston, it's almost like going CJ at cap, but getting different in different ways too is always important.
Right.
But
yeah, that's our showdown first look. Again, Discord we'll be talking about our final looks and stuff like that and be submitting our lines. But we got a few more minutes to be on here. And do you guys have any start sit questions? Anybody want to go back to a main slate or early only, afternoon only, kind of recap or do another look? This is kind of y'all's time. If y'all have any questions or concerns, we'll wait a couple minutes if y'all do have anything, and if not, we'll just get out of your hair.
Yep, I think that there's a good amount of slates on that I liked on here, and also if you have any fantasy questions, of course ask.
Another notable thing, Marshawn Lloyd will be making his debut today. So not fantasy viable to start, but it's a positive for him because he's been dealing with a hamstring injury for a couple of weeks. So let's talk, Gary.
Let's hear it.
Ask some questions. What do you want to go over, man?
Hi, let's talk.
We trying to talk, man.
Let's see. Come on, Gary. What you got? Don't ask me about the Green Bay today.
I have a quick college question for you.
Okay, sure.
So obviously Texas has another great outing. It's notable because Arch came in due to a non-contact injured. It sounds like a strained abdomen, but it was a weird injury for Quinn because he got hurt mid-play and then played 2 more, but was never touched. So it was kind of like he tweaked it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But then Arch killing it, but they win by 49. And then on the other hand, you have Georgia squeaking by against Kentucky 13-12. They were 22-point favorites. How possible is it that Texas might even jump up to 1?
I just don't think they need to. I think the point of Texas going from 3 to 2 was to set up the 1-2. So it really, in my opinion, controversially, it would be fun to talk about.
We even said against or last week when they did jump up to 2, they had less number 1 votes than Ohio State.
Right.
So I expect them to at least leapfrog Ohio State in the number 1 votes. And maybe it's not even a split like 50-50 or 60-40, but it's like getting closer to where it's like, Georgia, you have one more rough week and we just continue to handle business and cover spreads and like they have been.
Whoop the hell out of everybody.
Exactly. So it'll be interesting to see. But that was it was a game that you didn't expect to be entertaining, but it became entertaining because it was Arch's, kind of true show out
Right.
first time since he's taken over. I mean, you have a Manning running 20 miles an hour on a 67-yard touchdown run.
Very
That's
cool.
definitely
It
worth
was it
talking
was
about.
definitely cool. He also, I mean, he didn't necessarily have like, I don't think this was his best game by any means. Like he was very good, but he also, had some lapses in judgment. He went 9 for 12, which is awesome, but he did definitely have some lapses. Quinn also played well, so we'll see what happens when Quinn comes back because they don't need to rush him with the fact that Arch is there. But yeah, let's see what Gary has to say. What do y'all think about Mahomes today? Yards, he's at 272.5, and it's typically a shootout with Cincinnati.
Well, that was basically it's at 273 now if you're talking prize picks. Um, maybe 272 on underdog. Usually underdog kind of has some lower lines and
Mm,
they're more up to date, so it's fun. Maybe they're just trying to be nicer to their community.
yeah, I appreciate them.
But Mahomes is basically the only over he hit last week was passing yards. He threw for close to 300 but fell short.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't. Cincinnati secondary is bad. They just weren't exploited because it was Jacoby Brissett and New England's receiving core that's probably bottom three, if not the worst in the NFL.
Yeah.
So very interesting. I actually want to pull up his other props just to see if I prefer anybody because we like Mahomes. He's going to be in our lines today. Let me see
270,
if there's any.
272 and a half is a pretty significant number, but I don't see a way that, like, I think like we're talking about, it's going to be a shootout. There's going to be a lot of yards. One thing I will say while Cam finds those though is there are currently 3 discounts on Underdog, and if you have not played Underdog yet, you should get on there. They give discounts all the time. It's a way to just do over unders on individual player props. And right now, Justin Jefferson, Mike Evans, and Jamar Chase are all discounted. So I believe you only get one of those to pick one of those. But pick your favorite one, put it in a line. We go into our Discord. We'll have props for you and pair them together and make some money.
Yeah, so just kind of looking at the props, there's nothing really sticking out. His fantasy score is 21.0. So you get a push there. Don't love it, especially when you don't get bonuses on prize picks.
Mm-hmm.
Rush attempts is 4.5. That's not terrible. Um, Pass completions at 24.5. He really was that was the one that I was surprised how split he was last season with it. If you just wanted an easy goblin, 1.5 passing touchdowns, he
Right.
doesn't often have only 1.5 as a line, even if it is a discounted or not a discounted, but a reduced line. So yeah, I think 273 is probably the best. I actually played one of my Flex Friday included him with his passing yards going the Demon 300 yards.
Okay.
So I haven't played the 273 alone. I might do it like with the last second in line,
I
but it's a good line to get.
Yeah, I will say also on Underdog it's 271.5. So you
Yeah.
get a little bit of a discount if you wanted to go there instead of on Price Picks. And then the next question is about Aaron Jones. He loves Aaron Jones this week. Gary, which prop would you like to talk about for Aaron Jones? I think that, we're probably chasing a little bit, but at the same time, he has done it for the last, 6 in a row or something like that, going
Yeah.
over this number.
I mean, I just think it'll be a sweat. I don't know because he also has pass catching ability. I actually might like his was his
Together.
fantasy score is at 12.5 in PPR. I think that's very reasonable. If you do truly love him today, I might prefer that over the rushing yards. Um, but we'll just kind of see what happens. I'm gonna stay away. Again, that doesn't mean I'm taking the under. I'm gonna take my favorite 10 to 15 props and just spread them out throughout the week. And I don't know if that's one of them.
So
Again,
Brees Hall last week had 54 rushing yards on 16 attempts. Um,
he should have less rushing attempts than
yeah,
Brees Hall.
and that was what I was gonna say. Is like he's probably gonna be down. There's
He
gonna be
only had
more
14 rushing
throwing.
attempts in a very positive game script for him.
Right.
So it's gonna he has to break away like a couple times to hit that to me. Because if he just kind of stays hovering around 10 to 12, assuming that they're gonna be trailing, I just that is over 5 yards of carry. And
And
that's against San Fran's defense, who just allowed one of the best running backs to have less than 3.5. So that's just kind of, again, I understand because it's six straight, but that's just not one that I typically want to attack. If
Right,
he
of
if
course.
he had the James Conner kind of potential volume on the ground, maybe I would kind of consider it. But if I don't have confidence somebody's going to have 15 rushing attempts and they have to basically get 5 yards to carry, and it's a good defense they're playing, it's really not an area I want to target.
Right. Gary, do you have any other props you want us to look at? I can also talk about some of the props that I'm playing this week that I don't know if they've changed price. Let
Brock
me.
Bowers continues to go down.
That's crazy. I don't
Right
understand.
now, or as of before the stream, he was 31 and a half for receiving, and he led the team in targets last week. They are the biggest underdog. They should be trailing. And if they are going to be attacking or doubling anybody, it's going to be Devontae Adams and not Brock Bowers. So I don't see how he lands under that number.
So you said Kenneth Walker is out, right?
Yes, Kenneth
Okay.
Walker is out.
So he was in my line, so I'll get a DMP for that. Brock Bowers over 35.5 is what I got him at. I never expected it to fall to 31.5.
But it
That's
did
crazy.
last week too.
Yeah,
Like
I don't
it
get it.
was because he was dealing with the foot injury, and we loved it at what was it at 42? It was at 42, and it didn't go up or down; it just stayed. But then he was limited in practice, and it went down all the way to 32, and we smashed it, and then it got up to like 36, and we were like, we still love it. It
Right.
did not change, so I don't know. That's an area I like. It's one of my favorite props today.
Yeah. Gary said that he's under on Isaiah Pacheco attempts. It's at 16.5. I think personally, like there is a lot up in the air with this game, so it could be where the Cincinnati Bengals are bad, and if that's the case, he's gonna have 18 pretty
Yeah,
easily.
I'm not in
Um,
agreement with that one. Like
so
that doesn't mean I want to pick the over. I probably would target over for maybe rushing yards, which is at 68. You can get that good old
yeah,
6'9". Rushing receiving is 86.5. Fantasy score at 14. He is a goblin to score a touchdown. So if he scores a touchdown, he is going to hit more than 14 fantasy points in a PPR league. Um, so I prefer all those numbers as an over instead of going under on his rushing attempts for a game that they're a touchdown favorite
I
at
also
home.
I also think if you look at
And Ramondre, again, I'm sorry to cut you off,
good
but what did he end up having last week? He
124
he
rise.
had I'm talking attempts. He had 25 rush attempts last week.
Woo.
So that's with New England. And I know Cincinnati should be more prepared this week, but Isaiah Pacheco has no competition for carries.
Right, absolutely.
Maybe pass work with other guys coming back or what have you. But yeah, rushing attempts, it's all him. And if they're playing from ahead, I'm not touching an under for his rushing attempts.
I think for me personally, if you look at his props, his first half and his first quarter props are the ones that interest me the most. He has a first half prop of 29.5 rushing yards, which is 30 basically, which is you said 69 on your side. So obviously that's 5 more
Mm-hmm.
per half. So I think that that's interesting. I also see a 0.5 first quarter receiving yards is a 1.15 to X right now.
Interesting.
And so I think that's interesting because if he catches one pass, he's going to get that. Um, First touchdown score is 2.76x. I don't know. Some of these other props are standing out more than the rushing attempts, in my personal opinion. So
Especially an under. Like we feel very good about him today. So I don't want to bet unders and try to hit a sweet spot.
right.
That's typically something that I want to avoid when it's not warranted to hedge a bet in any way.
Okay. So what about this one?
Okay.
They have a rival between him and Zach Moss. Okay. What do you think the difference between rushing yards is between him and Zach Moss?
Well, if his prop is 68 and a half, I'd assume they would have something for Zach Moss around 45. So let's call it 22.
Okay. So it's 17. And I think that that's super interesting to go with
Yeah, I love
Isaiah
that.
Pacheco. I think that one is the
Just
one.
18 more rushing yards than
Yes.
Moss.
I think that that's
Yeah.
very, very good.
Yeah, that's a good
So
find for sure.
I don't ever really play the rivals because I never like they're a little uncomfortable, but that one I'm pretty comfortable with because I don't think Zach Moss will have a ton of rushing attempts. Let me check his number because he is currently at 12.5 rushing attempts,
Hmm.
which I think might even be high. Like he had 9 last week,
Right.
and it was goal line, 2 goal line rushes, I think, because they got down there, and then I think Chase Brown was in. Let's see, let's get those numbers. Chase Brown was in more than him, though, I believe, even knowing he scored the touchdown and made him look the number one. He was not the number one. Let me get that. Let's see what Gary said. 100% sweat. Yeah, everything's going to be 100%
Yeah,
set.
but again, there's a lot of lines that are reasonable to where I don't think you need to sweat
Right.
on certain things.
Well, like I said, I think that Isaiah Pacheco versus Moss line's interesting.
Yeah, that's the best line that I've heard of all the props that we brought up for him specifically.
Let's see. I wish they would do it against Chase Brown. I can. Yeah, my computer's being slow, so I cannot get the snap counts all of a sudden.
It's all good. But yeah, what are some other props and stands y'all are taking for guys today? Obviously, our top guys, of course, he's a thumbnail, Jahmyr Gibbs, in a great smash spot, highest total, highest implied total. He should be a very great option, whether you're as a standalone or against Tampa. And then we're heavily prioritizing the Rams and Cardinals, and then the Chiefs and Bengals game. So that's a lot of Rashee Rice, Isaiah Pacheco, Yoshi Voss. And then with Arizona, basically every skill player that is relevant is worth a look. We didn't mention Greg Dortch, but he was the most productive receiver last week for them. And then the Rams, obviously Cooper Kupp is the easy chalk, but when you have 21 targets and you're under 8,000, you just got to eat it at that point. And then the other two receivers who each had 7 targets, both 4,000 and under.
So I'm going to say this. The football guys, NFL snap counts, they had this backwards earlier in the week. They have 33 snaps for Zach Moss and 17 for Chase Brown. At the beginning of the week, it was the other way. Like, I think they inputted it incorrectly. So for some reason, I thought it was backwards. So now looking at it,
based on the touches that they had, I thought was very interesting. But yeah, it makes more sense that Moss
had more. Yeah, because I remember looking at this number just to see, and I know Chase Brown was on top, so I'm betting something happened early in the week that has changed.
Just screwed it up a little bit.
No problem though.
It's all good. All good, man.
Any other questions though? Coming out
11 o'clock. We got an hour till lock. We're about to be getting the Discord and firing off some of our final looks for the main and early only, and then afternoon only. Obviously, we'll be discussing as well, because that one was a fun slate that we talked about earlier.
Yep, absolutely. We'll be sending it out, everything we are going to play today in there. We will discuss after this what we're going to do. But
all right. But yeah, last call, guys. Almost 11 o'clock. We appreciate you guys if you were able to tune in. Like if you haven't already before you go out the door. Follow us on our socials. Again, Discord is going to be more of a look for us today. And then let's have a better week. Let's kick ass this week.
Yeah,
that's what I'm looking to do, is rebound.
Well, we appreciate y'all, and if no more questions, we thank y'all for coming and hanging out, and we will see y'all next time.
Yeah, good luck, guys.